This is Atomic Shinobi, and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Naruto got banished and awakened Rinnegan after Sasuke Retrieval arc. If you enjoy this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Actual world. When she felt the katana in her hand, everything seemed to come into focus. She grasped the Zanpakuto tightly before raising it to her face and whispering, Kudakero, Kyoka Suigetsu, Water Moon, Mirror Flower, Shatter. When the wind blades flew at Kurinai and tore through her, blowing off her limbs, tearing her organs to pieces, and causing blood to spill everywhere, time returned to normal. Tuya closed her eyes and sighed, saying to herself, I'm sorry. Then, she heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Kurinai standing there with her Zanpakuto, who was entirely unharmed. What are you sorry about? Yugao and Enko being surrounded by Oto Nin made Enko appear like a child in a candy store. It was unfortunate that they were unaware of who they were interacting with because it appeared they believed she was a worthless woman. Oh, how mistaken they were. Who should I choose? There are so many options, but I still can't decide, Enko pouted. What the hell are you talking about? Yugao, who was standing back with her, raised an eyebrow. With a sly smile, Enko glanced over her shoulder and said, Oh, just which one to kill first? I mean there's so many, I don't want the others to feel jealous that I didn't want them first. At that remark, Yugo's eyebrows shot up, and she yelled at her purple-haired friend, I doubt they care if they were killed first or not. Yugao and the Oto Nin started to perspire when Enko shrugged her shoulders and said, You never know, there may be some here who are masochists, and with them working for Orochi. Teme, you could never be too sure. An irritated Oto Nin screamed, Just attack us for crying out loud. Enko spun around on him, so it was the wrong thing to say. Look, I told you, he's a masochist, she said with a victorious smile before charging at the person who yelled, kunai in hand. When they hit the ground with her on top, she dove for him and smashed the kunai through his head, destroying his brain. She ran at another shinobi, flipped him over, and slammed a kunai into the back of his head before leaping off him and hurling two kunai at two Oto Nin that were running at them, killing them. She whirled around as she hit the ground, encountering a group of 5 shinobi. Time to go bye boys, she exclaimed as she flipped through hand seals. Kaiten. Heizekisho. She swore loudly, and the words spread to the enemy, engulfing them completely. Then she smiled, and with a simple clink of her flint-covered teeth, the area erupted in a flurry of fire and screams, shattering the shinobi. A large group of shinobi attempted to hit Yugao, who was swerving in and out of the hailstorm of kunai and shuriken on the opposite side of the field. She called out as she went through the hand seals. Sweden. Suijinheki. Using only the moisture in the air, a wall of water immediately in front of her began to be attacked by shuriken and kunai. After that, she held her Zanpakuto up in front of her and rotated it counter-clockwise. As she turned it, her eyes began to glow an ethereal white, and chakra burst out of her, turning the air cold and causing fog to roll in. Mei, Soda no Shirayuki. As the dust settled, it became clear that her Zanpakuto had changed, turning the tsuba, hilt, and blade entirely white. A white ribbon emerges from the pommel from the handle's end, and the tsuba transforms into a hollow snowflake-shaped circle. Glancing up, she saw that the water wall had perfectly turned to ice due to her chakra. After gathering chakra, Yugao pierced the ground in front of her once, forming a big circle of ice beneath her feet. She then brought her Zanpakuto down once more and did so 4 more times in a semicircle. The ice from the wall began to crumble as it approached the edge of the blade and the ice particles from the protrusions she made in the ground, and she assumed a battle stance with Soda no Shirayuki pointing forward. Tsugi no Mai, Hakuren, she exclaimed, and a moment later, Soda no Shirayuki's blade unleashed a huge, potent wave of pure white ice. Once a large slash appeared in the newly formed ice, cracks began to outline from it until it completely shattered, leaving nothing but ice dust to flow to the ground. The attack blew past whatever ice remained from the wall and completely enveloped the field in front of her, encasing all enemy shinobi in their places. As she called out, she noticed a group of shinobi sprint at Enko from behind and snarled, piercing Soda no Shirayuki into the ground. Ice covered the area. Juhaku. Ice shot across the ground toward the shinobi, immobilizing them as the ice began to form on their bodies, making them panic until they were reduced to statues. After removing Soda no Shirayuki from the ground, the people broke apart again. She glanced at Enko again to check on her, but was caught off guard when she noticed a big white bone sword coming directly at her. As it approached, she stared at it with wide eyes. Even though she knew it was a pointless attempt, she ran in its direction using the remaining speed she had. She could only hope for a miracle because she lacked the speed and jutsu or techniques necessary to get there quickly enough. Anko's entire life flashed before her eyes as she watched the bone blade approach more quickly, losing her parents to the Kyuubi attack. Becoming a student of Orochimaru and feeling accepted at last, feeling betrayed when Orochimaru gave her the cursed mark seal, leaving her for dead and ostracized for the rest of her life, followed by the positives, like making friends like Kurinai and Yugo, joining Anbu and working with Ibiki, and finally, her most recent conversation topic, Naruto Uzumaki, Namikaze. Sand appeared out of nowhere, snatched the bone blade, and threw it in the opposite direction just as it was about to reach her. Gaara was standing with his arms crossed and a neutral expression on his face when Anko turned around and he turned to face Anko. Mitarashi. San, I advise you to get away from here for your own safety, it is now my turn. Even though Anko wanted to object, she gave in and nodded because she knew how he fought and it didn't suit her to be in his way. She also knew that he wouldn't attack a comrade anymore because of Naruto. Meeting Yugo, who appeared surprised, she said, "Come on, there's no longer any Oto Nin anywhere." Yugo merely nodded and put Soda no Shirayuki away. Before the two of them fled, she said, "All right, let's meet up with Naruto-kun." Before he yelled, Gaara gazed into the forest as though he was waiting for something. "Show yourself, Kimimaro Kagaya." The Kagaya appeared across from him a moment later. He called up his sand and said, "I don't know how you survived, but you won't survive here today." Kimimaro vs Gaara. Kagura gave Gaara a slight grin as he looked at him. Retaliation for his most recent loss to this young man was all that was on his mind. With squinted eyes, Kimimaro declared, "This time I will kill you without fail." As he stood there, Gaara remarked, "If you think I will be defeated, then you are mistaken." Kimimaro raised both of his hands and pointed them at Gaara, shouting, "Enough talk, you will die here today." Then he called out, "Teshi Senden." Suddenly, a volley of what appeared to be bone bullets shot out of his fingers at Gaara. When the bullets approached Gaara, his sand automatically formed a wall in front of him to act as a shield. The bullets struck the wall with such force that it would normally shatter, but the chakra in the sand made it more resilient. With his hands in a seal, Gaara exclaimed, "You'll have to do better than that, Kimimaro Kagura." Sabaku Q. It rushes over to Kimimaro, ties his arms in the air to prevent him from moving fully, and wraps the sand from the wall around his feet, pinning him to the ground. Laughing, Kimimaro said, "You think this will stop me?" Suna Shigur. A cloud of sand then materialized above, and it began to hurl bullet-like sand fragments at Kimimaro. As soon as the bullets struck him, they would merely strike his skin and fall to the ground, causing Gaara to scowl. With a slight manic gleam in his eyes, Kimimaro exclaimed, "Ever since you left me for dead, I had been cured of my illness, which now allows me to use my full power. Nothing can penetrate my skin anymore, and I am invincible. I need to stop this as soon as possible because whatever happened to him made him more unstable." Renden. Suna Shigur. The sand cloud overhead grew to cover a significant portion of the sky and began showering Kimimaro with bullets, which were now much sharper and denser, but again to no avail. When Kimimaro became bored, he began to grow bones. Karamatsu no Mai. Bones appeared everywhere on his body, enabling him to shave the sand off of him before aiming for Gaara, who was now preparing for a real battle. Kimimaro began to charge at Gaara, who sent tendrils at him with his sand, only to have them cut through or knocked away. Gaara raised his hands and summoned a lot of sand, but it came down, slamming the sand onto Kimimaro as he turned it into rock and cemented it there. However, to Gaara's surprise, the rocks began to crack before breaking, exposing an unharmed Kimimaro who simply appeared irritated. With punctuation, he began to transform using the cursed seal of earth. His skin turned from pale white to dark gray, 6 large bone spines emerged from his back, and a long bone spiked tail grew. "How many times will I have to tell you that, me?" he said. Then, before assuming a stance, Kimimaro reached behind his back, extracted his spinal column, and turned it into a makeshift spear while spinning it around. As they began to take shape, Gaara said, he held out his right hand and collected what appeared to be stronger material from the earth, causing it to gather in his hand. The sand then took the shape of a large halberd, with the end portion resembling Shukaku's claw. Saiko Zatai Kogeki. Shukaku no Hoko. He brought the spear back behind him and assumed a stance, saying, "Even if Shukaku isn't sealed within me anymore, he will always be a part of who I am." The last Kagaya known to man, the Kazekage, and both shinobi charged at each other, bringing their weapons down on each other and beginning a fierce staff weapon duel. They never stopped beating each other. After receiving a fortunate shot a few minutes later, Kimimaro swung his spear in an arc and saw it strike his cheek, shattering his skin. The spear then proceeded straight through his head, causing his entire body to feel like sand, revealing it to be a Suna Bunshin. He spun around and watched as the halberd was thrown at him, but he stood there in fear that it would shatter, only to be horrified when it pierced him right through, causing him to return to normal as bile and blood began to rise from his throat. "Your arrogance has led to your defeat, Kimimaro Kagaya," Gaara said as he approached him, keeping Kimimaro in place as sand encircled his feet and turned to solid rock. Kimimaro yelled angrily, "How have you done this? It shouldn't be possible." Gaara simply shrugged and arched an eyebrow in anger. "When I use the jutsu, I gather all the strongest materials in the area and bring them together, resulting in my halberd. It took some time getting used to using it, but I eventually got the hang of it. If you think this will kill me, then you are mistaken." Gaara then raised his hands slightly as the sand rose and formed a dome around Kimimaro, saying, "I know that won't kill you, but I am not finished yet." Gaara called out as she went through the hand seals. "Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu." A huge ball of fire blasted out of his mouth and struck the sand dome, but rather than blowing up, Gaara gave it chakra, turning it into a flamethrower as the flames began to completely encircle the dome. Gaara halted the jutsu after a minute, allowing the smoke to dissipate and exposing a glass dome. "It was really beneficial and saved me at one point to learn some elemental jutsu from Naruto." Gaara watched as Kimimaro's face turned horrified and said, "This is how you will die. While you may have indestructible bones, what about your internal organs?" Kimimaro cried out in terror and rage, "No, you can't do this to me. I must live. I must complete my goals and serve Orochimaru, Sama. And that is why you will die." Gaara saw Kimimaro choke after a minute, having run out of hair. He used a Kaden jutsu to burn away the oxygen and turn the sand dome to glass, which accelerated his death. Knowing that Kimimaro was dead, Gaara used his earthly power to seize his body and drag him into the ground. He then broke apart the dome, though it was more difficult because he couldn't control glass as well as he could his sand. Gaara left after observing that there were no enemies on the battlefield. As he disappeared into the sand that blew toward Naruto and Sasuke, he said, "Now to make sure Naruto does what needs to be done for the sake of us all." Gate East Jiraiya and Tsunade versus Orochimaru. Orochimaru ducked under Tsunade's punch, which struck her waist, causing her to flinch in surprise at its strength. Jiraiya then kicked the snake in the ribs, knocking him away, but he was able to turn himself around due to his extraordinary flexibility. His smile was filled with bloodlust. "Don't you see, you two will never win? It has always been this way between us, and it will never change," he said. "Yes, things have changed, Orochimaru. We were teammates, hell, even best friends, and you left the village for what? Power, to learn how to become invincible. And at what cost? Your humanity. Your very own sanity? There is no point in even living if you spend it all being alone." Jiraiya growled, his temper increasing as he talked. "You know nothing of the pain I have felt. The pain of losing your parents before your very eyes." Tsunade yelled in rage at having to bring up the past. "Are you serious? I lost my brother and fiancé in the war. I couldn't save either of them, and they died in my arms. And you say I don't know pain? I am the only one left of my family, so don't you dare preach to me about loss? I lost the boy I saw as a son at the hands of the Kyuubi as he gave his life away to save the people who would later harm his son. Because of my own selfish actions, I let Naruto be harmed and hated by this village, all because I couldn't stand to be here anymore. You're not the only one who knows about pain and loss," Jiraiya said with less force, but the rage was present. While demonstrating hand signals, Orochimaru exclaimed, "Enough. I am tired with talking. Nothing you say will ever change my mind. Now prepare to die. Sene Tajashu." Orochimaru's sleeve erupted in large snakes that were headed directly for Jiraiya, who was already prepared with a countermove. While chakra accumulated, Jiraiya ran at the snakes, holding out his right palm before thrusting it forward. Rasengan. He continued to run toward Orochimaru, the ball of pure chakra tearing through the snakes. As dark chakra appeared to accumulate and form what appeared to be the Rasengan with two spinning rings around it, Orochimaru held out his right hand, shocking and horrifying Jiraiya. Orochimaru ran toward Jiraiya and thrust forward, holding out his hand. Shokasaiken. Rasengan. When suddenly, boom, occurred. Both Sannin were flung backwards but recovered easily, landing on both feet. Both of them looked up and were shocked to see the large crater they had just formed. The orbs clashed and ground against one another, causing chakra to lash out from the output. Jiraiya gazed up at Orochimaru's face, stunned. What the hell was that? It looked the... Orochimaru smirked when he saw the face of his former teammate and remarked, "Rasengan? It was more like a variant version made out of my own rather darker chakra. Is that all you can do? Steal other people's hard work for your own? You're pathetic. You're lower than the scum of this planet. Jiraiya growled at Orochimaru. Orochimaru was unhappy with her and Jiraiya's circumstances, let alone the village as a whole, and she appeared to have forgotten that there was another Sannin on the field during all of this. For the sake of the entire village, they had to win at all costs. As he looked up wide-eyed, Tsunade sprang forward at full speed, leapt high in the air above Orochimaru, and brought her heel down. Satenkyaku. Orochimaru hardly moved as Tsunade's heel struck the earth, triggering a massive explosion as the earth gave way, destroying nearby buildings and leaving a massive crater. But Tsunade wasn't finished. She turned to face the snake and gave the ground a fierce punch. The ground gave way under her weight just as it had previously, but this time it developed fissures that accelerated to Orochimaru's location, where they caused the ground to split open into a ravine. Orochimaru barely managed to get up in time to avoid the fall. She still possesses all of her strength, even in her advanced years. I should stop playing around and be more cautious because I'm underestimating them too much. Orochimaru squatted low, touching the ground with his chest as he landed back on land. Mandara no Jin, Orochimaru exclaimed, and to the surprise of the two Sannin, he threw a wall of snakes out of his mouth. The snakes then began to rise and charge in the direction of the Hokage and Sage, knocking aside everything in their path. Kusanagi. Like blades protruded from the snakes' open mouths. Holy shit! Jiraiya exclaimed, looking shocked. Tsunade exclaimed, what the hell, as the snakes continued to pour down. Jiraiya slammed his hands on the floor after flipping through hand seals. Doden. Yomi Numa. The ground between him and the snakes shifted into a sizable swamp, which began to ensnare the snakes. However, they began to plow over it, which was insufficient. He shouted as he went through hand seals again. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Jiraiya and Tsunade were lifted from the ground to a height of roughly 40 feet as a thick cloud of smoke engulfed the area, in the atmosphere. Gamabunta, the Toad Boss, was soon visible after the smoke cleared. He gazed up into his summoner's rare serious face and yelled angrily, what? Jiraiya, what the hell have you summoned me for now? Jiraiya just gestured ahead. As Gamabunta at last turned to look at the vast swarm of snakes, he declared, Konoha is under another invasion by Orochimaru, and we need your help to get rid of those. Gamabunta reluctantly said, very well, I'll let you off this time. He knew that Orochimaru was not someone to play around with and that it was time to take things seriously. Jiraiya commanded, Bunta, give me some oil. Right. Gamayuden. Jiraiya yelled his own jutsu as Gamabunta's cheeks swelled and he sprayed snakes with a lot of oil. Kaden. Enden, he yelled, launching a stream of flames onto the oil from his mouth. The two jutsus combined to create an unmatched heat that rained down on the poor snakes, who screamed in agony as they were reduced to nothing more than dead skin on the ground one by one. Kaden. Gamayu Enden. Both voices rang out. Tsunade grinned as she observed the assault. Then she leapt from Gamabunta to the vacant area next to him and said, that's that taken care of, now I think I should bring out the big guns myself. A huge poof announced the arrival of another summons as the Slug Queen, Katsuyu, emerged in all her splendor. Kachiyose no Jutsu. She exclaimed, placing her hand on the thin air as though it were touching something. As she landed on her head, Tsunade said to her summon, Katsuyu, I need your help, we're being invaded by Orochimaru once more. Calmly, Katsuyu said, I see, then I will lend you my services Tsunade. Sama. Accordingly, Tsunade said, thank you. Now that he was fully upright, Orochimaru gazed hatefully up at the two large summonses. I see, so that's how it's gotta be, huh? He slammed his hands into the ground while passing through the same hand seals. Kachiyose no Jutsu. Once more, the signs of a massive summons materialized in a billowing cloud of smoke that blocked Orochimaru's view until it cleared, exposing Manda, the king of snakes, with his enormous purple skin. Orochimaru. How dare you summon me? I should destroy you where you stand, Manda yelled. Orochimaru asked innocently, oh. And here I thought you would like the opportunity to finally kill Gamabunta and Katsuyu. Manda turned to face the two big summonses. Humph, very well, but I want 100 sacrifices as soon as this over. Orochimaru gave a malevolent grin. Of course, I already have them ready. Gamabunta raised his head and gave Jiraiya a serious look. Where is Naruto? Wouldn't he normally be fighting this guy with you? Gamabunta had always respected Naruto more than he did Jiraiya, and his admiration grew even more after he found out that he was the owner of the Rinnegan because he understood that only the person who could change the world, for better or worse, would be given those eyes. Jiraiya turned to watch the battle between Naruto and Sasuke in the distance. He's fighting with Sasuke Uchiha, to the death this time. Gamabunta turned back to face the snake and said gravely, I see, then we better hurry up so we can help him. He then leapt to his feet and drew his dagger. Let's go Katsuyu, the Slug Queen said, hi, as they sped ahead. Tamari and Team 8 Kiba cried out, Shikyaku no Jutsu, as he fell to his knees, his eyes growing wilder and his canine teeth and finger and toenails growing to the length of claws. Jujin Bunshin. Akamaru became a clone of Kiba and leapt on his back in the same way that Kiba was crouching, but he appeared more untamed because he was actually a dog. Kiba was ecstatic to see Oto Nin hurrying toward him and exclaimed, let's see how you guys like us now. Gatsuga. Before launching themselves at the enemy in a drill. Tornado. Like fashion, master and partner leapt high into the air and began spinning at incredible speeds. As they approached the enemy forces, the two drill. Tornadoes ripped through their ranks, reducing the number of soldiers until they skidded to a halt. Man, these guys are pathetic. As more shinobi approached Kiba, Temari's voice echoed, don't speak too soon, dog. Boy. She brought her fan back and swung at the adversary. Okamaitachi. Tamari let out powerful air currents that began to collide, creating numerous vacuum pockets that she could use to slash at her targets, tearing them to pieces. Tamari turned and saw shinobi coming toward her. She bit her thumb and began to bleed, wiping it on the fan before swinging it and yelling. Now that's how it's done, Tamari said. Kachiyose. Kirikiri mai. Then she called forth Kamatari, a sickle. Wielding. One-eyed weasel. Kamatari rides the wind and slashes through everything it comes into contact with as the fan creates a tempest. As the tempest continued for several hundred meters, the whirling winds began to tear up trees, boulders, and other debris, destroying the defenseless enemy on the battlefield. Now that's how it's done, she joked, glancing at the blood-stained floor that was covered in shinobi corpses. With his hand in his pockets, Shino, facing his own enemy, gazed down at them as though he were their lord. His voice was monotone as he stated, it would be foolish if you chose to fight me. Why? Because you will not survive once I strike. Ha! You think you scare us? A haughty Oto Nin exclaimed. Another exclaimed, yeah. You're nothing but a Konoha pussy. Shino pulled his arms out of his pockets and said, if that is your decision, very well. At the same time, a swarm of bugs swarmed behind him, frightening everyone. The enemy tried to repel the bugs that flew around Shino, but any attempt was evaded as the bugs simply flew around the weapon and jutsus fired at them. The bugs then began to completely encase the shinobi, covering every part of their body and tapping them. Hijutsu. Mashidama. The bugs slowly and agonizingly consumed the shinobi's chakra, killing them with each passing second until suddenly there was nothing at all, no sound, no pain cries, and the bugs appeared to collide before taking off, revealing nothing at all, no bodies, no blood, nothing at all. The person they had taken control of had been totally destroyed by the bugs, who had consumed their blood and chakra and eaten everything away. He called out and mentally instructed his bugs to attack more enemies while holding out his right hand. He commanded, kill them. And, seemingly realizing what he was doing, the bugs once again drained the shinobi of everything, leaving nothing. A very unusual behavior for the gentle and kind Hinata was to look at her enemies in front of her with nothing but hatred. She had become a chilly fighter, much like Neji, since she had begun to train diligently following Naruto's exile. She was composed, calm, and emotionless, making her ideal opponent for Byakugan. She now needed to destroy those who wanted to kill her friends and destroy her house in order to show her friends and allies that she is a kunoichi deserving of the title. Her eyes briefly closed before snapping open a second later. Byakugan. Veins swelled on the side of her eyes, revealing her bloodline to the world. Running slowly at the enemy, she quickly accelerated until she almost appeared in front of them, killing them instantly with Juken strikes to the heats. She then spun around occasionally, slowly lowering the numbers as she moved at a speed that would make Kiba jealous. And Oto Nin shouted out just as she was ready to hit again. Kaden. Gokakyu no Jutsu. She turned around quickly and saw a huge fireball approaching her. She began to slowly spin until she called out, forcing chakra out of every chakra point. Hakesho Kaden. She spun so quickly that she was only a blur to everything else, and suddenly a huge blue dome of chakra formed around her. 10 shinobi were in front of her when she stopped and formed her stance after the fireball had dissipated. You're in my field of divination, preparing to die. Hake Rokuhuyan Sho. 2 Palm. She appeared in front of 2 shinobi and killed them by striking out at their hearts. 4 Palm. She repeated her action in front of 2 more people. 8 Palm. Another has been added to the list. 16 Palm. After being struck 16 times, 3 more were dropped. 30.2 Palm. The poor man fell to the ground like a vegetable after 30.2 strikes. 60. 4 palm. She appeared before the final one, decimating him completely and leaving him for dead after he was blasted back with the final palm strike to the chest. She paused to catch her breath and turned to see her team staring at her with admiration, respect, and shock. "All right, Hinata," Kiba encouraged. Shino nodded, "Most impressive, Hinata." Temari grinned. She laughed and then became serious as she said, "I knew there was something about you I liked." All three of them nodded as she said, "I'm going to go help Sakura, she looks like she's having a tough time." Hinata said softly, "Be careful, Temari-san." Temari grinned and walked off the field. "We should head for the direction of Naruto. San, there are no longer any Oto shinobi in the area," said Shino. With excitement, Kiba exclaimed, "Right, let's go." Sakura vs. Fubuki. Sakura stated, "I thought you died," as she peered at her opponent, whom she and the other members of the team had determined to be deceased. Fubuki grinned, and she finds that smirk extremely frightening. "I was left for dead, but I never died." Orochimaru. "Sama found me and gave me reason to live, gave me I always wanted, power," she grinned. Sakura sarcastically questioned, "And I'm the lucky one to have to face you?" For a moment, Fubuki scowled thoughtfully. "Well, I had always wanted to get that Uchiha prick back for what he did to me, but he's Orochimaru's toy now, off limits I guess," she replied with a smirk. Sakura let out a sigh, tightened her glove fit, and assumed a stance. As she charged forward, aiming a punch at the girl, she said, "Then I'll finish the job here and now." However, the girl backflipped out of her way. In the end, Sakura punched the ground, tearing it from beneath her as debris and rock were flung skyward. She was blown away from a kick to the ribs when a voice to her right said, "Nice punch, but you'll have to do better than that if you intend on beating me." She glared at the smirking pink-haired bitch as she looked up from her lowered position. "Gosh darn it, I should stop underestimating her." As he punched the ground, more rocks were blasted upward, blocking Fubuki's view of Sakura. "Believe me, I plan on it." Sakura appeared on Fubuki's left side and kicked her in the side, causing her to scream in agony as she heard her ribs crack. She then ran after the woman, grabbing her foot and swinging her around as hard as she could before letting go and throwing her into a building that collapsed on top of her. Fubuki, who was attempting to stand up, moaned as she supported herself against the force of the kick, not to mention the building above her. "Damn bitch. I'll kill her slowly and thoroughly as soon as I leave." She got up and gave Sakura a hateful glare as she removed the last heavy part from her. The ice user exclaimed, "Get ready to die, bitch." As they went through hand seals. Hayatan. Haru Moko. A tiger made of ice appeared on the field, its eyes glowing yellow, and the air around them abruptly grew cold. Fubuki then gave the tiger a mental command to attack Sakura, causing it to growl before sprinting at the other pink-haired woman with the intention of tearing her limbs from one another. Sakura merely gazed at the approaching tiger as she collected the required chakra in her feet to employ a method that Tsunade had taught her that would eventually be required, demonstrating how correct she was. She briefly raised her leg before slamming it into the floor. Satenkyaku. A huge structure formed from the kick, shattering the ice tiger as it hit the ground. Fubuki was also almost knocked off her feet by the explosion, but she was fortunate to jump back in time and avoid suffering more damage than necessary. Naturally, she was not prepared for Sakura to suddenly appear in front of her and punch her, sending her flying through the building and out the other side before colliding with the wall. Her chakra and presence itself grew darker and colder as she stood up on unsteady legs and black marks began to appear all over her body, occasionally flashing purple. From the top of the building that Fubuki crashed through, Sakura questioned in disgust, "You have the cursed mark?" She said, "Yes, I'm going to kill you with." Her hands and feet suddenly developed claws. Her skin turned gray. Purple, her hair lengthened and turned violet, her eyes turned yellow, and horns grew out of the top of her head as her muscles slightly swelled. Sakura was shocked to see that the entire building exploded due to Fubuki's strength as she ran at it in her new form and punched it. Sakura had jumped from the explosion when Fubuki appeared in front of her and kicked her in the side, sending her to the ground in a crater. Someone shouted as Fubuki was coming down, but she couldn't reach her target. Kamidachi no Jutsu. The wind began to encircle her and then formed what appeared to be a tornado as tiny wind blades tore into her flesh, tearing her to pieces as her cursed seal nearly instantly healed before she was flung away. Temari landed in front of Sakura and assisted her in standing up. Sakura stood up and asked in confusion, "What are you doing here?" Temari shrugged and turned to face the freshly recovered Fubuki, who approached them. "We finished our guys and you look like you could use help over here." With sadistic delight, Fubuki remarked, "Well, now I get to kill 2 people, I feel like it's my birthday." Tamari grimaced and said, something is seriously fucked with her. Sakura continued sarcastically, gee ya think? Can you keep her held in one place for me? Tamari shrugged and said, sure. Tamari exclaimed, Fusujin no Jutsu, as she swung her fan, blowing sand and dust at Fubuki. Unfortunately for her, this was a distraction jutsu, as the sand and dirt got into her eyes, temporarily blinding her, but it was all the time Sakura needed, as she appeared in front of the woman, used all of her strength, and kicked her head clean off her shoulders. Tamari grimaced slightly at the sight of a head being thrown off so easily and said, ouch. Sakura shook her head and muttered, I didn't like it either. With some concern, Tamari remarked, we should clean up here and go meet up with Naruto, no doubt their match is getting dangerous. Sakura nodded and said, right. They both set out to eliminate everyone before reaching their next stop. The West Gate Guy and Kakashi versus Kabuto. Kabuto was standing across from Kakashi and Guy in a small section of the village, wearing that fucking smirk as though he had already won the battle. As he adjusted his glasses, Kabuto laughed and said, doesn't this all seem familiar to you? With an eye. Smile, Kakashi remarked, the last time you ran away, so if you're going to do that then yeah. With a serious expression on his face, Guy said, come on Kakashi. Let's take care of this guy quickly so we can help the others. He was aware that the fight would not be simple. As he pulled his headband to reveal his Sharingan for everyone to see, Kakashi said, 8. He called out, flashing through hand seals at almost blinding speed. Kaden. Hosenka no Jutsu. Kakashi blew out several fireballs that were aimed at Kabuto, but he managed to avoid them as they collided with the ground, causing tiny explosions. He ducked just in time to let a kick go over him because of his Sharingan and instincts. Kakashi turned into mud when Guy swung Kabuto into the ground by grabbing the leg above him. From atop a building, Kabuto remarked, nice show of strength. But not good N. He was unable to finish because Guy quickly planted a fist in his stomach, causing him to cough up a lot of blood. After launching Kabuto into the air, Guy pursued him but only kicked him in the stomach, sending him back to the ground where Kakashi was waiting. Kabuto could only make out the outline of a foot as he descended before he was flung across the floor. Before chakra engulfed both of his hands in a luminous blue, Kabuto was able to get himself off the ground with relative ease thanks to his advanced healing abilities. Chakura no Mesu. Kabuto leapt at Kakashi and engaged him in a taijutsu duel that tested Kakashi's mettle. While fighting Kabuto in a very risky game of taijutsu, Kakashi couldn't help but feel a little uneasy because he knew that one mistake could be his last because Kabuto's chakra scalpels could easily cut an important artery in his body, ending the game. The medic's left hand had feinted a slash just as Kakashi was about to counter Kabuto, forcing Kakashi to dodge in the opposite direction, just as Kabuto's right hand was about to make contact. Fortunately for Kakashi, he has some realistic friends because Guy showed up out of nowhere and sent Kabuto flying with an uppercut. With his deep voice as usual, Guy asked, are you all right Kakashi? Kakashi looked up as he went through hand seals and began to gather Raiden chakra in his right hand while his left hand gripped his right wrist, saying, yeah thanks, that was close. Then, with the intention of killing Kabuto, Kakashi leapt to his feet and pushed his arm into Kabuto's abdomen. Reikari! He exclaimed as the lightning tore through Kabuto's internal organs, causing him to scream in agony as his internal organs were torn apart and burned. But the scream of agony quickly turned into a laugh so terrifying that it completely paralyzed Kakashi. Kabuto's odd gleam in his eye caused Kakashi to question what in the world was going on. Kabuto muttered, boom, and blew up, flinging Kakashi into a building. With a cry of, Kakashi, for his comrade, Guy leapt for the building and began lifting Kakashi out. When he was pulled out, he asked, are you alright? Kakashi nodded while groaning. Yeah, just a little burnt here and there. Kabuto spoke before them, saying, I must congratulate you Kakashi and you Guy. Sarcastically, Kakashi questioned, oh really, and what's that? No. One has pushed me that far before other than Orochimaru, Sama and Naruto. Kun. But, I must take my leave right about now. Hai was about to follow him when he said, you're not going anyway. Kabuto smirked and said, you'll find that I am. Then he disappeared. Damn it. Kakashi blurted out. Guy received a nod before they rushed to assist the others, and he said, come on, the others need our help. Group Guy Neji shouted, Hakesho Kaden, as he used the ultimate defense, his clan's most valued jutsu, to knock the enemy that had surrounded him away, either killing them or knocking them unconscious. He ran forward and hit every shinobi he saw. Since he had the Byakugan and could see for miles, there were many people around. When he saw two shinobi using jutsu, he ran at them and thrust his palms out. Hake Kusho. Neji's palms screamed two compressed air vacuums, striking the targets in the chest and sending them crashing into a wall, where their backs snap and they die. Neji gave the other shinobi a chilly glare and declared, "These are weak and unworthy of even living. Even if we die, Orochimaru Sama will be the one who will destroy this pitiful village," and Oto Nin yelled. "Oh really, and what makes you think he will even survive?" Another exclaimed, "Because he is a god, and no god can be killed." The man was so foolish that Neji shook his head. He declared, "Even if he were a god, gods are always defeated by someone stronger." He then assumed a position where he was prepared to kill the last of the shinobi he would have to contend with. Hake Hyaku Naijahachi Sho. By the time he was done, the enemy forces had been reduced to nothing more than limp bodies scattered throughout the village after 128 direct hits to all of their chakra points. He said, "If there were ever a god, I would bet on Naruto-san," and then left to assist the others. When Neji arrived, she saw Tenten using all of the weapons she had in her scrolls to slaughter the enemy. She appeared to be enjoying the scene and had a big smile on her face. Tenten said as she laid two small scrolls on the ground and put her hands on them. Kai. A second later, the two scrolls in the shape of two smoke dragons are launched into the air, releasing smoke as they do so. "So Shoryu." Tenten then leapt between the two scrolls and began to quickly conjure and hurl a variety of weapons in a fierce barrage at the enemy beneath her. The enemy attempted to flee from the rain of weapons, but all of them perished as a result of the explosive tags on some of the weapons exploding upon impact, shrouding the area in a cloud of smoke. Neji grinned at Tenten as she landed back on the ground. "Nice work, Tenten." Tenten nodded and looked around, blushing at the compliment. "Where's Lee?" With a shout out and a flash of green, they received their response. Konoha Senpu. Lee's opponent was completely destroyed by a series of well-placed, fast kicks to the chest and a complex kick to the face. Before Neji or Tenten could blink, Lee went on to the next guy, and so on, and son. Lee said, "Konoha Shofu," as he slid under someone and kicked up, his foot making contact with the guy's chin and sending him flying. Konoha Goriki Senpu. Lee then kicked the man in the face, sending him back to the ground and breaking his neck after beating the living daylights out of him. He saw Neji and Tenten observing him as he landed back on the ground. He excitedly yelled, "Neji, Tenten. Isn't this a perfect time to show these Oto Nin what it's like to share the springtime of youth, with fire in his eyes and a pumping fist?" Tenten saw some shinobi backing away and attempting to escape from the green beast, so she whispered to Neji, "If he keeps doing that we won't need to fight." "I think you're right." However, the shinobi were about to run away when they were unexpectedly covered in what appeared to be purple crystals. They saw a woman with blue, spiky hair stamping the floor, causing pink crystals to shoot along it, encasing the shinobi in crystal before breaking it. "Shodan. Amiwatari no jutsu," they exclaimed. She turned to Team Guy and said impassively, "Weak fools, you don't deserve to survive if you plan on running away." "Let me guess," Tenten began. "You work for Orochimaru. Only people who work for him would kill their subordinates." When she finally saw Lee, she muttered, "My name is Guran, and yes, I work for Orochimaru Sama, but they were not my subordinates, they were weak-minded fools who would run away from someone who is very strange indeed." She then shook her head. Neji raised an eyebrow. "So you're a Shodan user as well, huh?" they said. "As well? There is only one who can use it, me." Guran yelled angrily at the individual who implied that it was available to more people. "Wrong. There is a friend of ours who can sue it, but I'm sure Orochimaru told you that, right? I mean, he wouldn't lie to you, would he? Especially when this person is fighting Sasuke Uchiha right now." Tenten replied with a smirk on her face. When Guran heard that, her eyes widened because she had always hoped to find someone who could use her bloodline, but she was never successful because, according to Orochimaru, she was the last of her kind, making her essentially his weapon. She didn't mind working for him at first because it gave her a reason to live, but eventually she grew weary of it all and began killing without any justification. However, if what they say is accurate, then perhaps, just possibly, there is someone who can make her feel like she truly deserves to live. She had heard a lot about the Namikaze, his strength, and his ties to the Mizukage and Reikage, and she knew that he could likely start and win the next great war with all of his connections. But unlike a certain snake, he doesn't because he doesn't want to and doesn't need to. She said, glancing at the three faces. "Take me to him. If what you say is true, then I want to see for my own eyes." When they all started to head toward Naruto, Neji remarked, "Very well." Kankuro and Team Ten Choji cried out, "Buban Baika no Jutsu," as his fist grew to about 4 times its original size and struck an Oto Nin, instantly killing him. As he raised his arm again, it reverted to its original size upon seeing the shinobi that had been flattened beneath him. He shouted and jumped up, running forward. When he yelled, "Baika no Jutsu," his body twisted into a huge ball, and he yelled again. "Nikuden Sensha." He roared forward, crushing his enemies as he began to spin into a huge ball as soon as he touched the ground. He called out, determined to do more harm. "Spike!" exclaimed, "Nikuden Hari Sensha," as he protruded from his body in all directions, dealing more harm to the adversary before he stopped. He smiled and hurried to his teammates, saying, "That was too easy." Shikamaru grinned as he stood in front of 3 shinobi and sealed the phrase, "Kage Nui no Jutsu." His shadow quickly extended from beneath him, and before the shinobi realized what had happened, strings of shadow shot up from the ground and struck them. He once put his hands in a seal when he saw more enemies up ahead. "Kageme no Jutsu." He yelled as several strings of shadow shot out from his body, halting all of the shinobi in their tracks. He shook his head and was about to tend to his captured shinobi when he heard, "These guys are pathetic. It looks like only Orochimaru, Kabuto, and Sasuke were the main force, and everyone else is nothing more than cannon fodder. What are they really after?" Show Harite. The shinobi were instantly killed when 2 enormous palms slammed down on them. "Nice work, Shoji. Good timing as well." Shoji grinned as he began to regain his normal size, "Thanks." Akahiji. Kiki Senkuku. Both of them turned to see Kankuro using the body of Sasori, who had been beaten by Sakura with Elder Chiyo's assistance. Sasori's neck and palms exploded with paper bombs attached to the knives, killing enemy shinobi in the massive explosions that followed. Its head had been severed from the body while they held their palms out. Kankuro spoke as he passed Shikamaru and Shoji, saying, "Well, that takes care of that." He looked around and asked, "Where's Ino?" "She's over th." Shikamaru paused while observing Ino use only her tanto to fend off her own enemy shinobi. By leaping from shinobi to shinobi and using her natural flexibility and nimble body to her advantage, Ino was easily dispatching them with quick blows to different body parts. He was flipped over by someone jumping over to him and kicking him in the legs, causing his hack to fall to the ground and stab him in the art. She flipped 2 kunai out of her position and threw them at additional shinobi who were pursuing her. She turned to see 2 shinobi approaching her, but they simply stopped and appeared perplexed. Glancing around, she noticed Shikamaru grinning and holding his hand in a sign. "I didn't know you were such a good fighter, Ino." She paused to remove the frozen shinobi, saying, "I've been training hard. Ever since 4 years ago I started to train harder, to help Naruto. And then when he came back and shown all of us at the level he was at, I chose to do something about it and pushed myself to above my limits." She grinned. Shikamaru shook his head and laughed. "It seems like no matter what he does, that troublesome blonde always makes us want to better ourselves." He laughed. At that, Ino laughed and said, "That's Naruto for ya." Shoji gave a nod of agreement and turned to face the empty room. He looked serious as he said, "We should go meet up with Naruto and Sasuke. I can feel their fight from over here." As they took off, Shikamaru sighed and said, "All right, let's go. If we're lucky, nothing too bad will happen. I hope nothing terrible occurs." The Konoha clan compound. Inuzuka, the matriarch of the Inuzuka family, Sume Inuzuka, exclaimed, "Gatsuga," as she and her partner Kuromaru prevented the invasion forces from advancing any farther. She snarled, "Damn, these guys just keep on coming." As more Oto Nin emerged, Hana, who was with her mother, snarled as well. She posed the rhetorical question, "They don't know when to give up, do they? They're loyal to the end." Sume growled once more, "And it's pissing me off." Hana smirked as she said, "I wonder if Kiba's having it any better." Her mother also grinned. Sume sighed and remarked, "If anything, he's finished and gone to help Naruto." "Why?" Hana inquired, perplexed. Sume sighed again and remarked, "Naruto is supposed to be fighting Sasuke, and if we're lucky, this village may still be standing tomorrow. Now let's take these bastards out." Gatsuga clan compound. Aburame, Hijutsu, Mashidama. It was unfortunate that the Oto Nin who were attacking the compound were surrounded by bugs and were unaware of the Aburame's true fighting and home defense skills. Shortly after the bugs ate the Oto Nin, Shibi Aburame sighed and shook his head, saying, "They should have learned what happened the last time they invaded." "Shibi Sama," exclaimed one of the clan members, "there are some more Oto Nin to the west of the compound. We don't have many clan members at that point." Before his body turned into bugs and he left the area, Shibi said, "Very well, I will take care of it at once." Hyuga clan substance. Hakasho Kaden. Oto Nin was flung violently from the Hyuga's final defense. Being extremely proud of his daughter's accomplishments at such a young age, Hiyashi told her, "You have indeed improved, Hanabi-chan." With a proud smile, Hanabi turned to face her father. "Thank you, father." Her father turned to more shinobi and said, "Well, come on, there are plenty more that need to be dealt with." Hake Rokuhuion Sho, Compound Yamanaka Clan. Inoichi yelled, "Shinrenshin no Jutsu," as he subdued an Oto Nin using his clan's jutsu, forcing him to kill his allies while seriously confusing them. However, it came to an end when one of them made the decision to stop it and used a kunai to stab him in the throat, tearing it out as the man gurgled on his own blood before passing away. Inoichi shook his head, asking, "You guys don't care about your own comrades, huh?" He was sneered at by an Oto Nin. The weak die and the strong survive. Inoichi snatched up a kunai and laughed. He rushed forward and yelled, "Then I guess this is your end." The clan compound of Akamichi as he transformed into a 30-foot giant who towered over all of his adversaries, Choza exclaimed, "Chobaika no Jutsu," and slammed his outstretched hands down. Choharite, the Oto Nin vanished in an instant. He felt something prick his big leg and looked down to see a kunai embedded in it, which only made him more irate. "Is this all Orochimaru's forces has to offer? What a joke," he exclaimed. He looked at the now frightened Oto Nin and exclaimed, "Oh, you're a dead piece of shit." The last thing he saw was a foot. Compound of the Nara clan, Kagemain no Jutsu. From underneath, Shikaku's shadow extended, shooting at some unwary Oto Nin and stopping them in their tracks. These guys really should have looked up on this village to see what we can do, but instead they attack blind. Kage Kyubi Shibari no Jutsu. The shadow began to ascend the shinobi's body, forming a hand as it reached their necks, then abruptly snapped them, dropping the body to the ground lifeless. Before turning to face additional opponents, he sighed and remarked, "And here I thought these guys would actually be a challenge. You guys ought to quit and return home." Jutsu no Kage Nui, the North Gate Sasuke vs Naruto. Earlier as he hefted a tree off of himself, Sasuke thought, "Shit, what was that jutsu?" Black marks began to appear on his skin as he staggered back into the area. "Let's take this up a notch." Sasuke pulled his arms out of the sleeves of his white shirt and let it fall around his waist. His skin turned dark gray, and a black four-pointed shuriken mark appeared between his eyes. His sclera turned black, but his eyes retained the Sharingan. His hair grew longer without losing its style. Blue venom lipstick seemed to appear on his lips, and he had hand-shaped wings on his back. Disgusted by what he had driven himself to, Naruto turned to face Sasuke. "So this is the new you, huh? Using the cursed seal of Orochimaru to complete the task?" With full-fledged rage, Sasuke growled at Naruto, saying, "I would sacrifice my soul to exact revenge on Itachi," he yelled fiercely. Naruto whispered, "Very well," as they bounded toward one another. And now despite his hollow side bringing out his potential, Naruto and Sasuke ran at each other's full speed. Naruto using his abnormal speed that he had developed over time with the help of his Zanpakuto and all those training sessions he had in his inner world. "Maybe I'll be able to use you after all this time, in a real battle," smirked Sasuke, who was running at Naruto at the same speed thanks to his wings, which allowed him to practically fly along the ground. He looked at his sword strapped to his side. When Naruto kicked Sasuke in the face, the young man with the raven hair blocked it with his wing while kicking out himself. Naruto grabbed the offending foot, and Sasuke flipped around, kicking Naruto with his other foot, sending him stumbling. Sasuke then followed up with an uppercut, sending him higher off the ground. "If that's all you got, then this should be a breeze." Naruto grinned as Sasuke used his wings to fly up to him and kick him to the ground. However, rather than crashing as Sasuke had hoped, Naruto flipped in mid-air and landed on his feet while sliding back slightly. Using one of the nicknames the villagers used to refer to him, Sasuke growled while looking down at the Rinnegan user, "I've got more than you realize, Kyuubi brat." Naruto's eyes grew icy. Before disappearing, Naruto said, "I guess I should take this seriously then." He then appeared in front of Sasuke and said, "No more playing around." He then used his hat to punch Sasuke in the stomach, causing him to cough up blood. Then he grabbed his arm and swung him around before releasing him, sending him flying into the air. Naruto appeared above Sasuke as he was about to orient himself. He raised his foot and then slammed it down on Sasuke's head, sending him crashing to the ground and creating a tiny mushroom cloud in the process. "Is the great Sasuke Uchiha here? What a joke." Naruto merely made fun of his widening as he saw a long pole of lightning shoot up at him. He acted as quickly as he could, tilting his head to the side so that the attack only slightly damaged his cheek. He narrowed his eyes when he looked down and saw Sasuke standing there without a scratch, but then he noticed that Sasuke had his hand raised and that Raiden chakra was streaming up from it. Chidori Iso, you're right, it's time to stop playing games anymore, Sasuke said, wearing the expression of blankness that he had acquired from all of his training with Orochimaru. Naruto smirked as he raised his arm to the jutsu and trailed his hand along it as if it were nothing, saying, first time we agreed on anything. An interesting jutsu, you've come a long way there, Sasuke. The blonde jerked his head back and thrust his hand out at Sasuke as Sasuke smirked and swung his hand at Naruto, sideswiping him with the jutsu. Shinra Tensai. No matter how many times I use that jutsu, I can't get enough of it, Sasuke said as the area around him burst into a shower of dust and rocks, making him smile. Ryujin Jaka warned Naruto over the mental link, saying, don't get arrogant, I sense something different about that boy. Something weird? Asked Naruto. A Zanpakuto spirit, like you Naruto, with some kind of taint inside him that makes him darker. I see. Then I won't undervalue him. Naruto felt Sasuke gathering chakra around him, blowing away all the smoke around him. He looked down and saw Sasuke draw out a white Sakabato with a cross guard that resembled 3 lightning bolts coming together at the point where the blade and hilt meet. Tell me, how were you able to move so fast like that? Sasuke asked, gazing up at Naruto with that expressionless expression. It's a skill I learned from one of my mentors called Shunpo, Naruto said with a laugh, and it enables one to move around at amazing speed. Gaining the ability to move quickly with each step requires a lot of training. This ability is what made it possible for my father to make the Hiraishin and for me to learn it as well, he remarked, grinning. So he does know the Hiraishin. I wasn't sure if that bingo book page was correct, but to know he can move as a blur, hell faster than a blur. I'll have to stop holding back and use what I learn. Sasuke maintained his blank expression, but he was nervous on the inside. All right, then I should stop being so reserved. Sasuke then appeared behind Naruto and kicked him in the back because he wasn't expecting such a thing. Naruto was sent across the sky before he made it look like the air had a solid ground on it by placing his hand on it and flipping up. He exclaimed as he vanished with an after sound that sounded like a boom, with a ripple in the air. Looking at Naruto, Sasuke grinned as he saw him launch himself into the air and then reset himself to his full height. That was my very own speed technique, Sonito, the exact same as yours in a way, except when I move it leaves a booming sound, Sasuke said. He slid one hand across his sword's blade and remarked, I learned it from my very own Zanpakuto. When Naruto learned that Sasuke had a speed technique similar to his, he briefly looked at him in mild surprise. So you do have a Zanpakuto, Naruto said. Then, doesn't this make everything even more intriguing? As Ryujin Jaka was pulled out of its sheath, sparks of fire flickered off the blade as Naruto spoke. He frowned and said, if I ever find myself in a tight spot, I'll use Tensa Zangetsu, but if Sasuke has something like a hollow in him, wouldn't that make him like me, or has that cursed seal infected it more? Pulling his Zanpakuto to his face, Sasuke grinned at Naruto and said, it's time I introduced you, say hello to Chidori. The name made Naruto laugh. Chidori, huh? Don't you find it ironic? Naruto asked rhetorically before pulling his own Zanpakuto along his face, showing the glint off of the edge to show the sharpness of it, and Sasuke had to admit that it looked deadly considering the blade was a bit longer than his own, for now. Say hello to Ryujin Jaka. Sasuke could sense the power behind the name alone just by hearing it. Don't you think it's time we took this to the next level? Sasuke smirked as he cut off his cursed seal power so that he returned to normal while powering himself up, causing lightning to flicker all around him. The skies above Sasuke and Naruto started to get darker as clouds formed above them with lightning streaking along, growing more powerful with each second. The clouds turned midnight black before all of the lightning streaks started to shoot down around Sasuke before converging on him as he called out, Nake, Chidori. With a tremendous explosion, the lightning struck him, and all of the smoke left him. His Zanpakuto was then fully covered in lightning, which reminded Naruto of his own Shikai. You're right, we should take this to the next level. Naruto laughed as he powered up himself, causing a huge blast of fire to explode from out of him before moving around him as if shielding him from any damage that might come from the outside. Ryujin Jaka Tenace, Bansho Isai Kaijin. The fire engulfed the Zanpakuto with such unnatural heat that the air around him began to catch fire just from the intensity, while all nearby trees were blown away while setting ablaze. The fire from around the katana grew and enveloped Naruto, who appeared unfazed by the heat. The power of the release shot up into the sky, parting the clouds above him, revealing a blue sky that began turning red. The fire around Naruto lit up as it now only traveled up his wielding arm. Tensa Zangetsu was still strapped to the side of his hip, but the heat from his release had burned all of his clothing off his upper body, leaving him only in his shoes and pants. His trench coat had remained on because he had sealed it to keep the flames out, but what can he say? He liked it. Such power, is this really what actual fear feels like? Then again, I've never fought someone else with a Zanpakuto. Who knows what he's actually capable of? Sasuke asked, looking at the power display with awe and a hint of fear. As he assumed a stance, Sasuke grinned and remarked, "Not bad, I'm impressed." Naruto laughed and said, "Enough talk. Show me the great Sasuke Uchiha is capable of." He disappeared from view, swinging downward in front of Sasuke before being blocked by Sasuke's Zanpakuto, causing the flames to wash over him. However, rather than being burned, he felt the pressure of the power and quickly parried the Zanpakuto. After the young man twisted around the blade and backhanded the Uchiha with his free hand, causing him to stumble, Sasuke stabbed forward at Naruto, who then aimed Ryujin Jaka at his neck. That was a close one. If it weren't for my Sharingan I would have a serious neck problem. He was able to withstand the attack because of his Sharingan, which allowed him enough time to bend his neck back and watch as the flaming blade swiped along where his neck was before backflipping away to a safe distance. I guess I shouldn't have expected it to be that easy, huh? Thought Naruto angrily. Tenjin Raiga. He yelled, swinging his arm forward and bringing Chidori in a wide arc. Sasuke snarled and brought his Zanpakuto back while charging it with lightning until it was practically glowing with the lightning and altering the atmosphere around him. From Chidori, a massive blue electrical wave erupted, roaring across the sky at breakneck speed in Naruto's direction. After drawing Ryujin Jaka away, Naruto directed his chakra toward it, causing fire to envelop it in a vortex. Enko Wanjetsu. He yelled as he swung his sword around, causing the fire's crescent blade to fly out and head directly for Sasuke's technique. Halfway between the two warriors, the two massive attacks collided, resulting in a huge explosion that shook the area and sent a shockwave so strong that it blew the two away, which was fortunate because lightning and fire were exploding all around. As Naruto regained his balance, he looked up to see Sasuke doing the same. He focused his fire on the front of the blade, holding his Zanpakuto out so that it faced Sasuke. Reinden. Sasuke was directly hit by several fireballs that erupted from the Zanpakuto's tip. After he had regained his bearings, Sasuke had hardly time to act before the fireballs shot in his direction. Harameku no Tate, he cried, holding his Zanpakuto in front of him. When the fireballs collided with the oval shield of lightning that had formed in front of the Zanpakuto, it threw Sasuke back from the explosion's force. Sasuke used his Shinigami abilities to defy gravity and glide through the air, but he was powerless to stop Naruto from appearing at his side and kicking him in the ribs, which sent him crashing to the ground and leaving a crater. With his clothes torn and a few cuts and bruises, Sasuke emerged from the crater and saw that Naruto was hardly hurt at all. He flew back up in the sky to the same level as Naruto, disappeared in a flash of Sonito, and then reappeared behind Naruto with a slash at his midsection. Holding his Zanpakuto tightly, he encased it in more flames, increasing its power. He stabbed up at Sasuke, aiming for his chest, but the Uchiha bowed backwards, avoiding the stab as it grazed his nose slightly. Naruto ducked low, avoiding the sword as it passed over his hair, cutting bits off. He then swung his legs around, aiming for Sasuke's own legs, but he leapt over them. As he backflipped, he kicked Ryujin Jaka, knocking it out of Naruto's hands and sending it crashing to the ground, still on fire. He then held Chidori up while he gathered lightning around him, causing thunderstorms to spread throughout the area. Behind Sasuke, the electricity being summoned took the form of a giant eagle. Kaminaki. He directed the giant eagle to attack by pointing his Zanpakuto forward, and it did so at a speed that would have made Shunpo appear sluggish. Now helpless, Naruto looked up at the giant lightning eagle that was coming toward him and, despite the circumstances, had to admit that was a pretty badass technique. As he was thinking of a way to save himself, he patted his left side, where Tensa Zangetsu was safely nestled, and said to it, laughing, "Looks like it's your debut today. Wow, and this isn't even with the hollow mask. If I ever use Ryujin Jaka, Tensa Zangetsu, and the hollow mask, I don't want to know the possibilities, now I just have to gain Bankai," he said, feeling a surge of power as he unwrapped Tensa Zangetsu. He had already been given the Zanpakuto's knowledge, so he raised it vertically as red. Outlined black energy erupted all around the Zanpakuto like fire itself. He then yelled, "Kuroi Getsuga." In a vertical blast, the black energy burst free and roared in the direction of the eagle. The Getsuga attempted to split the eagle in two as they batted against each other as the black energy and eagle made contact, with the eagle attempting to break through the Getsuga. When Naruto realized that the two techniques were still engaged in combat, he silently fell to the ground, grabbed Ryujin Jaka, and now held his two Zanpakuto, power rushing through him like a tsunami. Another explosion rocked the area, but this time the black energy covered the sky and the lightning flowed around it. The explosion was so big that it actually hit the ground, causing Sasuke to blow back through the air towards the ground and create another crater, while Naruto stood there tearing large chunks of rock from the ground. Not bad, Dobi. I didn't think it was possible to have two Zanpakutos. Once more you've proven me wrong. Sasuke stood from the crater, smoking a little around the edges, but he had a smirk on his face that irritated Naruto. Where do you intend to take this? Naruto asked, holding both Zanpakuto in his arms. Tensa Zangetsu was flickering black energy, and Ryujin Jaka was brighter than ever. It's just you have all this power and it actually amazed me you were this strong, even though we haven't truly tested our shinobi abilities, Sasuke said, laughing as his body exploded in lightning. However, he stated with a more solemn expression, I can go one more level. Could he have gained Bankai? If he does, I don't know if I'll last long enough. Damn it, I've been lacking too much, Naruto said, looking shocked as Zanpakuto and Sasuke's bodies began to glow brighter. While placing two fingers from his other hand on top of the blade and scratching it, Sasuke raised his Zanpakuto horizontally in front of his chest and exclaimed, Bankai. A second later, the village was rocked by a blast of raw power that engulfed the entire region. To his dismay, Naruto received a full-fledged Bankai as a reward from Sasuke. Naruto and Sasuke's portion of the forest standing in the trees, two figures watched the battle below and were impressed by how it was going, especially considering how young they were in their Shinigami powers. What was frightening, though, was that they weren't going all out. They could sense much more power in both boys, but the Namikaze boys seemed to have an endless supply of potential and power. These two individuals had come in search of Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze because they knew exactly who he was, what he held, and they wanted to fortify him for the future. For example, the Akatsuki had recently added much more powerful members, but they were unaware of his true identity at the time. Among the figures was Yoruichi Shiwan, a dark-skinned woman with golden-collared eyes and long purple hair that she wears in a ponytail. She usually wears a black sleeveless undershirt with no sleeves, an orange overshirt with two white straps on each shoulder, a large beige sash around her waist, black stretch pants, long beige wrist warmers that are fastened with bands, and long beige leg warmers with brown light shoes. At the age of 10, she developed Shinigami abilities after bandits attacked her family's home, killing her mother and then her father. Witnessing this infuriated her, and she killed them all with ease. In order to succeed in the world and spare other families from having to experience what she had trained diligently since that day, working with her Zanpakuto virtually constantly. She had earned her Shikai and Bankai, and she had advanced to the point where she could fight without a Zanpakuto by using her exceptional speed to kill efficiently and other special skills she had developed. She ended up in a village called Uzushiogakure 6 years ago, where she joined the special ops, but she also had another job. She recruited Shinigami powered people for the village. The village's cage was a kind, gentle woman, but when it came to fighting, she was a cold, trained shinobi using her own Zanpakuto. The cage had told her that it was a way to honor a memory of someone close to her by helping those who were different from others, and they wanted those with Zanpakutos to be part of their village because she wanted them to be properly trained and ensured that they were on the right path with their power, as well as because it would bring the village back to the top since the Azukage had rebuilt the country 18 years ago. But because of the suffering she experienced simply by being there, the cage never wanted to return to Konoha, where she had learned about a Zanpakuto user. However, she had discovered her Azukage, the long-lost son of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Initially, she intended to return to Kushina to inform her of the news, but if word spread that the two were related at this point, chaos would ensue. The child already had Akatsuki breathing down his neck, and now Orochimaru and Sasuke Uchiha were pursuing him as well. While researching the heir of the Namikaze and Uzumaki, she discovered that the young man had been exiled from the village 4 years prior for failing to bring the last Uchiha back. Since then, he has traveled throughout the countries, met and trained with the Raikage, made friends with the two Jinchuriki there, and won the Mizukage's affection, despite the fact that he was best friends with the Kazekage. He was genuinely his mother's and father's son, and throughout this journey, he had become an S-rank shinobi by simply training to his heart's content. As she watched him fight, she had noticed that he had two Zanpakutos, and she couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by their power. They already had some people with an inner hollow at Uzushiogakure, and unlike some countries, they treated them with respect for their power and the fact that they can actually tame the beast. Hell, they had a special group for them called the Vizards. They were similar to Kirigakure's Kiri no Shinobi-gatana Nananan Shu, but they were hoping for more than just 7 members. She also noticed that something was off about his chakra, that it was slightly tainted, and she knew exactly what it was, his inner hollow. But in contrast to the others she had met and collaborated with, Naruto's inner hollow appeared more tranquil, as though it were one with Naruto. She believed that this might be the case if they collaborated, but why would anyone do that unless they were aware of Naruto's problems and might be doing it to survive? Regardless, she would eventually learn the truth. She saw it as a way to give back to her for giving her a life, a place to feel at peace, and a place to call home, so she had planned to train the young man and teach him everything she knew to make him safer in the world because he was her cage's son. She could teach him what she knew so that he would be prepared when he faced Akatsuki, especially with its additional forces. All she needed to do was wait for this battle to be over before approaching him when she believes he is ready. The other person next to her would have been Inara any day. He had dark brown hair that was shoulder length, wavy, and parted down the middle. He also had a faded goatee. He wore a white jacket with a black outline, but with the collar turned up. He wore a black sash around his waist, like a matador. He wore white gloves, and he had a tattoo of the number 1 on the back of his left hand, which he covered up with his glove. He was different from someone who used a Zanpakuto. Well, he was now, and he was an Arrancar, which is similar to a Vizard except that both have an inner hollow. After being captured by the snake Sannin, Orochimaru, years ago along with several other people who wielded Zanpakuto, he discovered that all of them were unique because they had an inner hollow that sounded to him like his curse seal. After some experimentation with them, the curse seal, and God knows what else, all of the Shinigami hybrids eventually had the inner hollow so merged with them that they became a completely different kind with strange abilities. They all eventually came out, but some of them were so corrupted by their position of authority that they turned evil and went to work for Akatsuki in the hopes of gaining more authority. Instead of having Shikai or Bankai like other Zanpakuto wielders, they had something called Resurrection that made them more powerful and more like their inner hollow. But there were others like him who, surprisingly, managed to maintain the majority of their humanity and ended up in Uzushiobikure, where they would team up with a Vizard because they are more alike than anyone else and they work best together. However, as of right now, the present, like Yoruichi, he was taken aback to see his cage's long-lost son, whom she had assumed had passed away, here, healthy and fit, and growing more like his father every day. He felt compelled to teach the boy everything he knew about the hollow side because he could sense it clearly in the boy and that it had merged with him, working in unison to create the ideal Vizard, Arrancar hybrid ever. What ought we to do? Yoruichi questioned her companion. With a sigh, Stark leaned back against a tree and said, "We can't exactly remove him from the village, so we'll have to wait for now. We must carefully approach him and give him all the details." Before turning back to face him, Yoruichi nodded in agreement. "Should we tell him about his mother?" With concern, she inquired. "No," Stark replied by shaking his head. "Not straight away anyway. We will approach him in about 2 weeks. That should give him enough time to get what he needs doing after this battle. I can tell he hasn't achieved Bankai yet, but he isn't far off it. What if by that time we are unable to approach him, knowing that anything could happen in a life like Naruto's?" she asked. "We share our knowledge with the Azukage. When she learns, she will undoubtedly want to see him but also feel afraid. He may have thought his mother had abandoned him, and he is aware that his father had passed away, but there was no body to confirm Uzumaki Sama's death, only that she had vanished. He must therefore be informed of everything. Otherwise, he might become irate and then happy. Sometimes this job was too much work." Yoruichi sighed. 2 weeks? According to Stark, 2 weeks. Raiga Kurasuki versus Kagura. Earlier, "Are you sure that's all you have?" When Kagura saw her handiwork, she asked or exclaimed, grinning ferociously. As Raiga emerged, lightning and chakra blazing from him, the building suddenly exploded outward, blowing everything off of it. He then put his sword's hilts together and began spinning them quickly before yelling, "Reigeki no Yoroi." She was shocked by what transpired next because blue lightning completely encased him, leaving no space for movement. Before the red man from Lightning Cove charged at her, she muttered, "Well shit, that wasn't supposed to happen. It's time I kicked your ass for good, you overgrown light bulb," she screamed as she charged at him. And now Raiga swung his swords at Kagura, throwing her back as she attempted to block, before she was flung across the battlefield. She swung her Zanpakuto at the man covered in lightning, but nothing happened as her scythe bounced off the shell, leaving her wide-eyed because nothing had previously been able to stop her Zanpakuto. Flipping up, Kagura flew through hand seals and stabbed her Zanpakuto into the ground while yelling, "Futon! Kyotatsumaki Kaimetsu no Jutsu!" Out of thin air, a massive tornado began to form, tearing apart buildings around her and sending them hurtling toward Raiga, destroying everything in its path. When Raiga saw the attack, he just grinned before disappearing into the ground, leaving Kagura a little uneasy as she didn't know where he was going. A few seconds later, Raiga suddenly erupted from the ground in front of Kagura, causing her to leap back and narrowly avoid being slashed down by both swords. Raiga taunted, "You're quick, for a girl." She smirked as she said, "Yup, you should ask my boyfriend." Her mind was racing with ideas. "After I murder you, I will," he yelled, charging forward and bringing both of his swords down on her as she brought her scythe up to block and counter his lightning by creating black lightning around it. While collecting black lightning around the blade, which only made it spark against his defense, Kagura knocked Raiga away and slammed her Zanpakuto down on him as hard as she could. She then called out, "Kuroi Kaminari Kurizento." Ha! A mushroom cloud formed from the powerful explosion as black lightning burst from the blade that was in direct contact with Raiga, blowing them both away. Raiga was still standing when she looked up, but she could tell he was hurt because his lightning armor was shifting a little and his breathing was labored. She picked herself up off the ground, or rather the tiny crater she had been blown into. Kagura yelled as she went through the hand seals. "Kurasutaru Getsue no Genkaku." Suddenly, the area was illuminated by the sky, which baffled Raiga as he began to look around, the lights slightly blinding him. "What the hell? Genjutsu?" he exclaimed, putting his hands in a sign. "Kai. What the nothing?" When Kagura noticed Raiga's perplexed expression, he put his hand in a seal and muttered, "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." Before approaching Raiga, 5 clones pretended to be there, making sure he couldn't see any of them. Before he could block it with one of his swords, one of the clones ran at Raiga and aimed the Zanpakuto at his neck. Grinding his foot around, he kicked the clones in the ribs, sending her flying. "Ha! You bitch aren't so tough anymore." "To whom are you speaking?" From behind, another clone asked Raiga, who was shocked to see Kagura standing there and saw nothing when he turned to look behind him. "What the hell is going on?" After going through hand seals, the Kagura clone exclaimed, "Futon. Hanichiri Mai," before creating a cyclone. Petals appeared out of thin air. Raiga attempted to block it, but the wind caused the petals to pierce his lightning armor and cut him. When another Kagura clone emerged on the opposite side of Raiga, she poofed away to stop the attack before Raiga could see it. Futon. Kazikiri. Shortly after Raiga poofed out of existence, an unseen wind blade sliced at his back, causing him to stagger forward before spinning around. The 4th clone materialized at his side and repeatedly struck him with her Zanpakuto, causing him to falter in his defense each time. She then unleashed a lightning bolt from her Zanpakuto at him, allowing her to vanish. "What on earth is happening here? I'm getting hurt, so it can't be Genjutsu, but why in the world is that butch showing up everywhere in these lights?" Getsue Shinku no Orori. Before the lightning armor began to flicker even more, the remaining Kagura clone spun her Zanpakuto into 5 tornadoes and launched them at Raiga, cutting him even through it. With her hand extended and chakra building inside, the true Kagura charged at Raiga, saying, "Here's a little trick Naruto. Kun taught me for pricks like you." Getting closer, she slammed the attack into his chest. Rasengan. When the lightning armor began to disappear, the chakra ball screeched as it ground against it. Kagura was able to push the jutsu into his stomach, tearing it apart from the ball's rotational power before he flew into a house and out the other side. Arg. She jumped off the last building and swung her Zanpakuto down at the body after jumping from one to another to get higher. Kuroi Kaminari Kurizento. Ha! When the crescent wave of black lightning that Kagura sent down struck, it exploded. "Well, good riddance, he was starting to piss me the hell off." Before she could say anything more, a power explosion rocked the village to its core. Glancing at the epicenter, she saw that it was in the direction of Naruto and Sasuke. The aftermath disappeared, revealing that Raiga's body had been destroyed and his swords had also been broken up. She hurried in that direction, saying, "That bastard better still be alive or I'll go to the afterlife just to kick his ass." Tuya versus Kurinai. Earlier, when she felt the katana in her hand, everything seemed to come into focus. She grasped the Zanpakuto tightly before raising it to her face and whispering, "Kudakero, Kyoka Suigetsu. Water moon, mirror flower, shatter." When the wind blades flew at Kurinai and tore through her, blowing off her limbs, tearing her organs to pieces, and causing blood to spill everywhere, time returned to normal. Tuya closed her eyes and sighed, saying to herself, "I'm sorry." Then, she heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Kurinai standing there with her Zanpakuto, who was entirely unharmed. "What are you sorry about? Now, how?" When Tuya saw a perfectly healthy Kurinai standing in front of her, grinning, she exclaimed, "I just fucking tore you to shreds." She raised her Zanpakuto with its face down and said, "You can say I owe it all to my own Zanpakuto. Kudakero, Kyoka Suigetsu." The next thing Tuya saw was Kurinai's lifeless body shatter like glass, which made her realize that it had never actually happened but had only appeared to. How on earth was that possible? Tuya let out a startled cry. It manipulates the five senses to the extent that the target may mistakenly believe that the form, shape, mass, feel, and smell of another individual are those of the enemy. Kyoka Suigetsu's release must be demonstrated to the enemy as part of the hypnosis's initiation condition. That individual will be totally hypnotized after only one viewing. Like a genjutsu that is impervious to breaking or being seen through. Tuya exclaimed in amazement at such a talent. Whoa. Now, you said you were sorry, but why? Like everyone else, weren't you given the order to kill by Orochimaru? Kurinai inquired. As she raised her tachikaze, still in Shikai form, and swung it at Kurinai with some slashes, the red-headed woman said, "It's got nothing to do with you." More long blades of wind flew along the ground, tearing it all apart as it was sent to Kurinai. However, Tuya stood in awe as Kurinai simply raised her Zanpakuto, preventing any of the blades from ever touching her, and watched with satisfaction as they disappeared. As she reappeared behind Tuya, Kurinai paused for a moment before continuing. "I told you, I can control all of your senses no matter what." A moment later, Tuya gasped in shock as several cuts appeared all over her body, even as they began to heal themselves thanks to her Shinigami abilities. Damn, what a bitch. A glowing chakra ball appeared at the end of her fist, which held her Zanpakuto sized dagger. She exclaimed as she swung her fist around, aiming it at Kurinai. After further powering up, she released it and watched as it flew at Kurinai, blowing up the surrounding area and creating a crater. From a safe distance away from Tuya, Kurinai said, "You need to work on your anger issues. Now tell me, why did you say sorry after you thought you killed me?" Kurinai asked. "Because I don't want to kill people for no reason. Hell, the only reason I'm with Orochimaru right now is because I have nowhere to go whatsoever," Tuya said with a sigh and a lowered head. "I was naive to believe that I would be able to kill him once I acquired my Zanpakuto in order to finally be free." Tuya explained with a dejected expression, "Ready to die. I knew the place I could ever go was Oto ever since I left for dead 4 years ago because of that lazy bastard and the Suna bitch." "I see," Kurinai remarked, considering that Tuya might be open to joining Konoha, or, more accurately, Naruto, since that is where she belonged. Mumbled Tuya, "Kill me." "What?" Kurinai questioned in disbelief. "Kill me, I said," Tuya screamed in despair. Kurinai informed her, "No." "What?" Tuya asked, looking perplexed. "I won't murder you," the rave-haired woman replied, "not when you could still do so much in the world." "What on earth are you discussing?" Confused, Tuya asked. "How do you feel about joining Naruto?" Kurinai questioned the red-haired man. Tuya raised an eyebrow at that. She knew who he was, of course, and that he was probably capable of killing Orochimaru on his own, so the offer seemed too good to be true. She also knew that Naruto was one of the good guys who would always be there for his friends and do his best to help them in times of need. "Why?" Confused, Tuya asked. "Naruto will eventually depart to establish a group or create his own village, so he won't be in this one forever. For that, he requires companionship, and I am aware that you require a reliable person who will always look out for you," Kurinai clarified. After giving it some thought, Tuya had to concede that it was a good offer. "What if he doesn't want me?" In an attempt to allay her fears of being left behind, she asked. Kurinai laughed and put her Zanpakuto away, saying comfortingly, "Naruto would never abandon anyone who needs help." With a sigh, Tuya put her Zanpakuto back in its sheath and said, "Okay, I'll join." Kurinai nodded and grinned softly. God then la. She was speechless when a loud explosion shook the village as if it had been rocked by an earthquake, and Kurinai's eyes widened as she looked in the direction of it. "Oh no, that's where Naruto-kun is. Hurry up!" As she and Tuya ran in Naruto's direction, she yelled. Gate East. Jiraiya and Tsunade versus Orochimaru. While Orochimaru stood atop Gamabunta's head acting as if he were a god, Manda slithered along the ground toward him. As he approached, he opened his mouth to reveal fangs that were dripping venom, but the Chief Toad's dagger stopped him before he could bite Gamabunta, and it held its ground. When Jiraiya landed, he rushed at Orochimaru and kicked him, but the man backed flipped out of his way. Jiraiya ran along Gamabunta's head and dove off, heading for Manda's head where Orochimaru was standing, looking over everything. The snake Sannin taunted, "Come on Jiraiya, surely you can do better than that." Nensen Zeshi. In order to avoid Katsuyu's acid attack on Manda, which only affected the ground and melted it entirely, both Sannin had to put more chakra on their feet in order to stay on Manda as it moved quickly. When a kunai sped past Jiraiya's face, nearly cutting his cheek, he had hardly time to react before he spun around and grabbed Orochimaru's wrist just as he was ready to stab Jiraiya with another kunai. Then, in a vicious attack, Jiraiya pulled down on Orochimaru and yanked him down where his face and knee met. Orochimaru was momentarily stunned before a fist struck his face, sending him rolling down the big snake. As Tsunade landed on Manda in his place with a heel drop, Jiraiya flipped off the snake back to Gamabunta. Satenkyaku. As soon as Tsunade's heel made contact with Manda's head, it was sent to the ground in a large explosion where the back of his tail flipped up, flinging Orochimaru away towards Jiraiya, who started to go throw hand seals. Kaden. Enden. When Jiraiya's blast of fire struck Orochimaru, it appeared to be a flamethrower, but to the Toad Sannin's chagrin, Orochimaru turned to mud. Jiraiya growled with annoyance on his face, saying, "Damn snake." With what appeared to be a smile, Gamabunta saw Manda's predicament and raised his dagger, bringing it down its head and pinning it to the ground. "Now stay there while I skin you alive." Bunta. To get rid of the snake, give me some oil. Jiraiya nodded to the boss Toad before performing a hand seal. Gamayuden. Jiraiya called out his own jutsu as Gamabunta's cheeks swelled out and he sprayed snakes with a lot of oil. Enden. Kaden. As he sprayed a stream of fire onto the oil from his mouth, he yelled. Both jutsus combine and shoot a broad stream of fire in the direction of the snake, which would probably kill it right away if someone else didn't yell, "Kachiyose." Rashomon. To the relief of the giant snakes, a huge demonic gate rose up from the ground, preventing Manda from using the fire-oil combination jutsu. Then, with the Kusanagi no Tsurugi, Orochimaru appeared in front of Jiraiya. Jiraiya managed to avoid Orochimaru's stab, but he was saved when Tsunade emerged behind the snake charmer and kicked Gamabunta to the ground. With Tsunade's assistance, Jiraiya stood up and remarked, "Phew, that was close." Tsunade smirked and said, "You can pay me back later." Jiraiya looked down at Gamabunta and said, "You can go now, Bunta." A second later, Manda was dispelled. The dagger was still in its head and preventing him from doing anything. "Fine, just take care of the snake bastard this time." Gamabunta grunted as he looked up at him and then disappeared, leaving the two Sannin to fall to the ground. Tsunade turned to face Katsuyu and nodded, saying, "You can go as well, thanks." Katsuyu appeared to bow before saying, "Very well, Tsunade. Sama." She vanished a moment later. "Why in the world can't Gamabunta treat me with respect?" Jiraiya asked, shaking his head as he turned to face Tsunade. Which Tsunade smirked at, he asked himself. She laughed when she saw Jiraiya with a tick mark and remarked, "I hear he's nice with Naruto." When a huge explosion rocked the village, both Sannin turned to face Orochimaru. When they realized where it was coming from, they all turned to look at the source. When a sharp pain shot through his chest, Orochimaru turned to face his two former teammates. "Well, Tsunade, Jiraiya, looks like we'll end this for now," he said, and then he ran off toward the explosion. As both Sannin pursued him, Jiraiya uttered the words, "Oh no you don't, you bastard." Tsunade worriedly thought, "Naruto, you had better be okay." Sakura, Temari, and Team 8, they were all running in the direction of Naruto and Sasuke when they were blinded by a bright light and nearly knocked off their feet by an explosion. "How on earth was that?" Kiba cried out. Hinata used her Byakugan and exclaimed, "It's Sasuke. Chakra is exploding out of him." With some concern, Temari remarked, "We have to move quickly because Naruto might be in danger." As they all accelerated, Sakura exclaimed, "Right, let's go, that's some crazy power." The West Gate Guran, Kankuro, Team 10, Team Guy, and Kakashi. Explosions could occasionally be seen as the large group ran towards the scene of Naruto and Sasuke's fight, and it was easy to tell from a distance that they weren't joking. But when the whole village trembled from what seemed like unadulterated power, they all stopped. "How on earth was that?" Ino looked around and asked. Shikamaru pointed to Naruto and Sasuke in the distance, saying, "I have no idea, but look." The entire area was covered in smoke, the sky was essentially illuminated by lightning, and the forest was glowing blue of some kind. "What on earth has occurred over there?" Kankuro inquired without anticipating a response. "Is the person like me at the place you mentioned?" Guran questioned Team 10. Ino smirked and said, "Yeah, and if you're lucky you may see how much he's like you, jutsu-wise the lot." Neji frowned and remarked, "It looks like Naruto. San is struggling a little bit with Sasuke. If we met up with him, wouldn't we obstruct the way?" Choji inquired. Tenten grimaced and said, "I don't know, but we gotta move quick if we want Naruto to come back safely." The other members of the group also had the same expression. "All right. Let's all go at full speed." With a shout, Guy sent them all flying. Forest beyond Konoha. Sasuke versus Naruto. "I'm sure you're shitting me." Over the explosion that nearly blinded him, Naruto yelled. When the light from the power outage began to fade, he lowered his arm that had shielded his eyes and saw what appeared to be a sphere of lightning and black chakra. San Trio Nin and Konoha. When everyone finally arrived, they were all shocked to see the battleground. It appeared as though a war had broken out, and it was unbelievable to think that just 2 individuals had done so much damage. My god, what might have transpired if they had engaged in combat in the village? Tsunade questioned Jiraiya in disbelief. He grimaced at the picture and remarked, I don't even want to know. As everyone stared in disbelief, Kagura frowned and said, Naruto's still holding back, a lot. What? Why? How? Kurinai cried out in surprise. This may be more difficult than we initially believed, Kagura said, maintaining his frown. I think Naruto has been testing him this whole time to see what he was capable of, and by his expression on his face, I take he didn't expect things to get his far, or for Sasuke to have such power. That's Bankai without a doubt, but I didn't realize Sasuke had a Zanpakuto. Shikamaru sighed and remarked, man, Naruto's still the troublesome blonde he always was. Should we not assist him? Tuya inquired as to Kurinai's companion. Are you not the adversary? Sakura inquired in confusion. To her surprise, Kurinai stood up for Tuya and said, that doesn't matter right now, but no, she isn't. In any case, we will obstruct if we assist. With a keen eye, Kakashi remarked, the best teamwork we can offer right now is to stay away. As if from experience, Gaara said, Naruto must do this alone. He surprised the group by approaching them and saying, this is Naruto's test for himself, to see how much he has improved against Sasuke. With Kabuto and Orochimaru, what are we supposed to do, Orochimaru? Sama. Holding Orochimaru's arm around his neck to keep him upright, Kabuto posed the question. When Orochimaru saw that Sasuke had such power without even realizing it, he scowled and said, for now we wait, it may get interesting. With Sasuke and Naruto before Sasuke stood there in his new form, with black lightning flickering around him and his Zanpakuto still encased in lightning, he had a purple energy wolf-like form on his body, a tail, and lightning claws on his hands and feet. The sphere of black chakra and lightning began to crack as a clawed hand punched through it, followed by another, and finally the legs came through one at a time. Juchidori. How does it feel, Naruto, to be around someone who is more powerful than you? Sasuke asked, grinning as he felt his newfound ability. He posed a rhetorical question. Nevertheless, Naruto responded, saying, I'll let you know when it occurs. Naruto barely had time to block a claw at his face with Tensa Zangetsu before Sasuke snarled and charged at him at a speed he was unaware existed, but it still pushed him across the ground. With his right foot up, Sasuke kicked Naruto hard, sending him flying through trees, and then pursued him. Sasuke then swung his Zanpakuto at Naruto's free spot, but Naruto was able to block it with Ryujin Jaka because of his own speed, leaving Naruto's frontal area free. Is this what the great Namikaze can do? Sasuke chased Naruto into the trees while he was still raised off the ground, slid underneath him, and kicked him upward into the sky, pushing off the ground to pursue him. When he reached him, he kicked him back down to the ground, causing a tremor in the ground. You are an embarrassment to your parents, Naruto. You are pathetic. If your parents could see how weak and pitiful you have become, they would roll over in their grave, he yelled at Naruto below. Konoha Nin. Oh no. Kagura retreated as she spoke. What? Tsunade inquired in confusion. She grimaced and said, there are a lot of things you can say to Naruto and not get him pissed. But the last guy who insulted his parents, well, I couldn't find a speck of ash left after Naruto was done. She was bloodthirsty, but Naruto's actions had made her appear subdued. I guess this is going to get riskier. Kiba smirked slightly as he asked. With Sasuke and Naruto taking off his trench coat, he threw it over to where the Konoha Nins were. He stabbed Tensa Zangetsu into the ground, crossed his arms in a cross formation, his body bent slightly, and glyphs began to glow all over his body as he yelled out. A blast of black chakra blew to the sky, pushing away all the dust around him, revealing him standing there looking down with energy pouring out of him in waves. Release the gravity seal. Everyone felt a gust of wind blow past them as the glyphs on his body flashed for a moment, and then more elaborate glyphs covered Naruto again. Release the chakra restriction seal. This time, Naruto's large concentration of chakra burst free, allowing everyone to feel the power and pressure it was releasing. In order to maximize the power of the Zanpakuto by enforcing it with such dense chakra, he stood back up fully and grasped Tensa Zangetsu as black energy began to wrap around it, strengthening the blade by adding his Kuroi Getsuga to it without releasing it. People can call me the Dobi, the dropout, hell even a demon, and I won't let it bother me, Naruto said, looking up to see Sasuke grinning smugly down at him. However, I decide that the line has been crossed when someone chooses to make fun of my friends or family. And taking into account your own family's legacy, Naruto just disappeared, never making a sound or moving from the grass or mud on the ground to indicate that he had moved, but the next instant he was in the sky, standing in front of Sasuke. You have no right to bring shame to my family's name. As he swung his Zanpakuto down on Sasuke, who attempted to block it but felt its added strength, he yelled. Behind the flashes of black chakra emanating from the blade, Naruto smiled and said, "Kuroi Getsuga," to Sasuke's horror. Before Sasuke could blink, a lot of red and black chakra exploded from the stored blade and slammed straight into him, causing him to scream in agony as he was slammed back to the ground. The attack destroyed a large portion of the forest, and the aftershock blew away everyone who had been watching as he just floated up in the air, looking down with a calmed anger. Hado number 33 Sokatsui. A blue ball of fire swarmed around Naruto's right hand, holding it downward while his left hand held his wrist. The ball of fire exploded out of his hand and shot like an arrow down to Sasuke, where it finally hit the ground and blew everything up. He instinctively brought Tensa Zangetsu up behind him to block a blow from Sasuke, who had come with his Chidori swinging downward. Naruto flipped over a leg kick from his clawed foot and taunted, "You're getting slow, Sasuke-chan." Gathering black lightning in his Zanpakuto, Sasuke then used his tail to grab Naruto by the foot and swing him around before letting him fly across the sky. He then roared forward and pulled back to build up a swing. Tenjin Raiga. As it headed straight for Naruto, the black lightning roared from the Zanpakuto. When Naruto saw the lightning crescent flying toward him, he flipped in midair and swung his Zanpakuto, firing off another Kuroi Getsuga to block Sasuke's move. The two eventually collided, resulting in a huge explosion that slightly blew them both back. After straightening up, Naruto turned to face Sasuke and saw that, for the first time since he had launched an attack, a scar had appeared along his chest from the previous attack. Is this all that Bankai has to offer? What a joke, Naruto said, wearing a fake pout. And here I was all hyped up, I'll finally face someone with Bankai. As his black wolf cloak began to darken with his rage and become more feral, Sasuke snarled, "Stop talking, Namikaze. You have yet to see anything." Sasuke yelled angrily. Tenraidenku. Sasuke began to quickly increase the output of his Zanpakuto, causing it to shoot off tiny shots of electricity. He lifted it up and pointed the tip toward the sky, which sent a single lightning bolt that tore open the sky and pierced the clouds. As he stood directly above everyone below, a massive lightning bolt that Naruto had never seen before pierced the heavens and descended upon his position. "Dude, I can't move or else everyone will perish, so this is bad," he cried out in rage. When Sasuke saw his situation, he laughed. "Hey, Naruto, what are you going to do? Give up everything to save everyone, or allow them to perish like the useless dogs that they are?" he yelled down at him. With a sigh, Naruto released his grip on his Zanpakuto, allowing it to fall to the ground with the hilt pointing skyward. Raising his hands, he exclaimed, "Shinra Tensai." He was hit by the lightning bolt, but he managed to hold it for a few seconds before the strain caused him to fall to the ground because of his jutsu. "Damn. This is tougher than I first thought it would be," he said, lying on the ground with his hands still raised, sweat streaming down his forehead from the strain of the jutsu, and his nose bleeding. He saw that everyone was staring at him from behind in amazement, fear, and panic. "Everyone, leave here immediately." "What? We can assist you, Naruto." Kurinai clutched her Zanpakuto in its sheath and yelled. "You can't," said Naruto, shaking his head, "because this is too dangerous. Go now. You will all be in the blast radius when this explodes any second." As more perspiration ran down his face, he yelled in a desperate tone. "All right, however, I'm bringing you back just to kick you in the ass if anything happens to you." As he watched the whole group flee, Kagura grinned and yelled, "I hope you do, love." He laughed before continuing. In the next instant, the technique exploded, destroying everything, and his entire world went white. Alongside the Konoha Nin, they were waiting for any indication that Naruto would live after they had just halted outside the forest, which was near the north gate, which was unexpected because that was where their battle began. "Do you believe he'll be okay?" Temari inquired anxiously. With a sigh, Tsunade gazed expectantly at the forest and remarked, "The brat had better be. I'm not losing him just yet." Kurinai grinned and said, "You and me both." She had gained self-confidence since meeting her Zanpakuto. Jiraiya shook his head and remarked, "I don't know how that Gaki has you woman wrapped his finger." Some of the women there blushed and drooled as Kagura laughed and smiled, saying, "The fact that he's a Viking in the sack helps." After witnessing Naruto's abilities and the extent he would go to for his people, Guran and Tuya decided to stick with the leaf, more especially, Naruto, because they felt like the odd ones out in the conversation. They were only able to stand up by using chakra in their feet, and as they looked up, they saw that lightning appeared to be pouring over the explosion as the forest suddenly burst into a black flash of light and the ground shook from its power. Ino said, "Holy shit." Smirking, Kankuro remarked, "Nicely put." How on earth was Naruto able to endure that? Sakura questioned in disbelief. Kagura watched with concern and remarked, "He has tougher skin than normal people." "What are you saying?" Hinata inquired. Since acquiring his Zanpakuto, Naruto has grown considerably stronger, and as he did, his skin hardened to the point where a typical kunai would essentially bounce off him. He can sustain more harm than people realize. Sometimes I even forget, she remarked, laughing. At that moment, the bushes began to rustle, and everyone became alert in case someone came out and saw Naruto stripped of his shirt, with Ryujin Jaka strapped to his right and Tensei Zangetsu in his left hand. His skin was spotted with burns, his forehead was bleeding, and he had multiple cuts on his body, all of which were dripping blood. Before his eyes rolled to the back of his head and fell forward, he said, "They got away." "Naruto!" Kagura yelled as she rushed to grab him. A second later, Tsunade approached and ran her hands over his body, turning them green as she said, "He's okay, just unconscious. However, he's exhausted. He must have been exhausted from all that fighting." As they began to return to the village, Tsunade informed everyone, "We must get him to the hospital." With Stark and Yoruichi, Stark respectfully remarked, "He's much stronger than I first thought." They were quite impressed with the blonde's ability to keep up with a Bankai, even though Sasuke was holding back, probably because Orochimaru was present. They had just watched the entire fight since the Konoha Nin had arrived. "Did you witness the moment before the lightning burst?" With a serious expression, Yoruichi questioned him. And he had seen the boy, no, the young man, finally put on his hollow mask by dropping one of his hands, which ultimately resulted in the explosion. As he watched Naruto get carried away while the girls worried about him, Stark said, "Yes, he has control over it, that's a good thing anyway. We had better move quickly." Yoruichi frowned, wanting to see more of the blonde, but she said, "We have places to be." "Right." Stark nodded, and then they both just disappeared. The following day, not to mention the mostly destroyed forest that Yamato had to rebuild with his Mokuton Jutsu, Konoha was on its way to recovering from all of the damage it had sustained from the last invasion. Shinobi of all ranks had been working around the clock to help with the repairs that had been made to areas of the village that had been most damaged by the main battles that had taken place. Knowing that anything is possible with Akatsuki still alive, Gaara and his siblings had returned their shinobi to the Suna in order to prepare their own village for any future invasions. They knew that Guran and Tuya would be taken to the Anbu jail cells, so they didn't fight. However, they wanted to talk to Naruto when he woke up, and Tsunade promised to make that happen. Since they live in the same apartment and work together so frequently, Kurinai, Yugao, and Anko had gone home to rest. Kurinai had informed them that she now had her own Zanpakuto, which revolved around illusions, which didn't surprise the two Kunoichi, though Anko felt a little envious that her friends had Zanpakuto while she didn't. Tenten and Lee had to return to their home because they had no clan to return to, but Team 8, 10, and Guy had all returned to their clan compounds to assist with the repairs that would undoubtedly need to be made. Sakura accompanied Tsunade back to the hospital to begin the healing process for the shinobi injured in the invasion, while Jiraiya also went to the hospital to check on Naruto and make sure he was okay, knowing that she was concerned about him even though he was not in danger. Though she didn't want to leave him just yet after speculating that he might have perished in the explosion from Sasuke's attack. Kagura slept on Naruto's hospital bed while he was still unconscious. However, Naruto was completely unconscious, so far. Hospital. The room of Naruto ringed violet. Gray eyes opened slowly and groggily, blinded by the outside light. When he opened them fully and adjusted, he saw that the room he was in was completely white, everything was white. With hatred, Naruto spat out, "The hospital." What he saw next, however, was a yawn and some shifting on top of him. When he looked down, he saw red hair. "Kagura?" he asked himself, not anticipating a response. As she unintentionally pressed her breasts against him, causing him to groan, she said, She looked up to see the Rinnegan staring back at her. "Naruto. Kun. When Sasuke attacked you, I thought he was going to kill you," she yelled, giving him a tight hug. "You know I'm tougher than that." Naruto joked, giving her a hug in return and caressing her hair. "And you know I'll never leave you. There's too much for me to do here." Before slapping his head, Kagura withdrew and gave him one of the most intense kisses that left him gasping for air. She smiled and said, "Don't ever run off and fight such a dangerous battle ever again, you make me worry too damn much." As he withdrew as well, Naruto laughed and smirked, saying, "No promises, I'm afraid." Kagura raised an incredulous gaze to Naruto and said, "How did you manage to survive Sasuke's attack in the first place?" With a sigh, Naruto turned to face her. "You remember how I told you about my inner hollow thing? So in the last moment as I saw it was going to explode, I brought out my hollow mask which makes me stronger so that it helped to defend me against the attack," he said, drawing a laugh from Kagura. "What?" he asked, receiving a nod. Confused, he asked. "Saved by a mask? What has this world come to?" Kagura simply shook her head. "Well, what's going to happen now?" she asked rhetorically, and Naruto laughed as well. Kagura simply shook her head and laughed. She questioned him. She raised an eyebrow as he grinned and said, "Well, I got a letter from Mei the other. She needed help training the new Kiri no Shinobi Katana Nanin and Shu." "Then we're heading to Kiri? When?" she inquired. She looked perplexed as he said, "We're not going anywhere." "You're going to go," he said, briefly widening her eyes. "What? Why me?" she asked, her expression bewildered. She looked shocked once more when he said, "Because you'd be the best at teaching some people how to use Zanpakutos." "Yeah. Apparently they all have Zanpakutos and the only one who can do vigorous training is you. Besides you can't care any guy, they will learn better from you," he said in a voice full of confidence in her abilities. The boy raised an eyebrow when Kagura said, "Fine, I'll get going soon but Tsunade wanted to see you about the two sound nin who want to speak with you." She sighed and nodded her head. "I'll see her later," Naruto said, shrugging his shoulders. "I'm busy for the time being." He concluded with a cheeky smile that made Kagura feel attracted to him. "Really? What are you doing?" As she traced her fingernails over his chest, she asked naively. With a laugh, Naruto drew her close to him and said, "I believe you understand." The next thing Kagura knew was that she was underneath him. Hoping the hospital staff wouldn't hear them, Kagura laughed, "Now you're talking my language." However, being caught is kinky. Afterwards, the office of Tsunade. Tsunade was waiting for Naruto behind her desk. She had heard that he had woken up a few hours earlier and was in perfect health aside from having low chakra, which, if she was being completely honest with herself, shocked her. Any normal person would have been hospitalized for days after witnessing his and Sasuke's battle, and if you're unlucky, you might never be able to leave the hospital. But as she considered the blonde's strength, she became aware of how much he had been hiding during the tests. But in spite of everything, she had never been more proud of him for growing so strong. Nevertheless, she was concerned because she somehow knew he would encounter stronger people in the world. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a brand new Naruto wearing his battle gear, his twin Zanpakuto at his waist. He sat down in front of her and said, "Kagura said you needed me?" The blonde and red-haired couple, whom she liked to call Chibi Minato and Chibi Kushina, were always together, so it was a good question for her to ask. "Yes, I did. Something has come up. By the way, where is Kagura?" She smiled as he said, shivering, "I had to send her to Kiri, the Meitarumi. The Mizukage had asked for me or her to help train her new swordsman and she's more suited for teaching. I can't scare men like the way she does." She read them from a piece of paper that was placed in front of her and said, "I see, that's fine. Anyway, we have two people from Sound, one called Guran and another called Tuya. No surnames." She smirked and said, "They wanted to talk to you, something about joining you." Confused, he said, "Joining me?" She paused as she observed Naruto considering the possibility of having someone else with him. Of course, he had considered forming a group or perhaps his own village. Yes. Tuya has a Zanpakuto like yourself and knows the only one who can give her the proper training in them is you, and she says that being with you, fighting the good fight will give her a home. She continued, nodding to Tsunade. Guran is basically in the same boat. She has a unique bloodline called the Shodan and she knows you're capable of using this element. She also feels the same way as Tuya. For a moment, Naruto considered her. If it were true and she possessed that element, she would be very beneficial to him in their collaboration. Although he could use the jutsu for it, he never fully utilized its potential, and collaborating with someone who possesses it, well, the possibilities were endless. Naruto nodded and spoke. Tsunade nodded and wrote down the cell numbers before giving it to him, which he pocketed. "I'll see them tomorrow, for now I need some rest." "What cells are they in?" she asked. He got up and said, "Thanks, but for now I need sleep." But Tsunade stopped him before he could reach the door. "Naruto." Naruto turned to face Tsunade, who was grinning. "I'm proud of the man you have become. Your parents would be proud." Naruto grinned appreciatively at her, honestly wondering if they would be ashamed of him after Sasuke's remark. Before he departed, he smiled and said, "Thank you Tsunade, that means a lot." Once again, Naruto Uzumaki. Namikaze is busy. The following day. The base of Orochimaru, there was a single bed across the door in a tiny, dim room with candlelight hanging on all the walls to create an eerie atmosphere. It had been a day since they were defeated and withdrew, and Sasuke wasn't pleased about it, but neither was Orochimaru, who was sitting in the bed looking like shit. Since his transference jutsu has a 3-year limit, he was currently in pain because it was running low. He coughed up blood every few minutes, knowing that things would only get worse. Yakushi Kabuto, his right-hand man, stood beside him. As Orochimaru began to heave, he declared, "This is the limit, if I don't administer a rank 10 medicine your body," and stopped. After saying, "I'll go get the other medicine, please a little while," he closed the door and walked out of the room. When Kabuto heard Orochimaru, he began to move down the corridor. Kuku, Kuhahahahahahaha. Upon returning to the room, Orochimaru stopped laughing and began coughing up blood. He looked up to see a lightning-coated sword pierce the wall at a startling pace. When the blade pierced his summoning tattoos on his forearm, Orochimaru crossed his arms to stop it, which caused him to recoil a little and cough up more blood. Orochimaru scowled as he looked. "I've never seen this kind of shape manipulation before, but this chakra composition is..." He looked up with his ominous slit eyes and whispered, still frowning, to himself, "Who is it?" At that point, the door began to get scratches before it literally blew off. The one who struck Orochimaru, Uchiha Sasuke, was standing in the doorway with his sword in his right hand slung over his shoulder and his left hand outstretched, blazing with lightning. After demonstrating his true abilities in the battle with Naruto, he had decided it was time to leave his apprenticeship with Orochimaru and finally take action to pursue his brother. Orochimaru smiled. "Just as I thought, it's come down to this." Before speaking, Sasuke maintained his indifferent mask. Opening his eyes wide, the fully grown Sharingan said, "There's nothing left for me to learn from you." His eyes were blazing with rage. "It appears even you will become a stepping stone to my goal." The blade that was stabbing Orochimaru then dug deeper as Sasuke moved forward, but Orochimaru shifted his arms to the side, causing the blade to strike the wall behind him instead. The curse mark moved across the left side of Sasuke's face as he said, "Orochimaru, you're weaker than me. That was proven in my fight against Naruto. There's no need for me to give you my body anymore." The snake Sannin snarled, "Such big talk for a little Uchiha chick." Sasuke grinned. He looked into his eyes and spun his Sharingan. "Hey, if I wasn't a little chick you wouldn't have been able to get me right? You couldn't get Itachi, so you settled for the little chick that was me, right?" he asked. "Isn't that right? The genius that was lauded as one of the Sannin, but you were only a genius to the norm of society. You couldn't surpass the Uchiha name or even come close. No matter how much a genius one is, in front of the Uchiha name, they're just ordinary people. You want to get closer to the Uchiha's powers so badly you immense your body with medicine and taking over other bodies. Your actions, from me, who bears this name, it looks ridiculous. Plus I don't like your methods. What's your purpose?" Sasuke chided, but he wasn't done. "To unravel the logic of this world or whatever, you've continued to play around with people like toys for such a stupid and selfish reason." With his other sword in his right hand coming down at a stab, Sasuke leapt at Orochimaru and screamed, "You make me sick." As he pushed his lightning sword farther, Orochimaru's mouth opened wide as the sword approached his head, causing a large, white-scale creature to emerge. Sasuke turned around to confront the snake as the body went limp. "So a white-scaled snake, that was your true identity." The snake in front of Sasuke was large enough to fill the entire room, curled, and covered in scales the size of its head. Its head resembled Orochimaru, with a long face and black hair that was spiky instead of his long hair. "You continued your experiments, so that you could move from body to body, and the end result is that appearance." Orochimaru gave Sasuke a fierce look before lunging towards him. He said, "Now, Sasuke-kun, your body, give it to me." Sasuke leapt over him, but he was only halfway there when two white snakes emerged from beneath the scales and dove at him. Orochimaru turned to face him and screamed as Sasuke whirled in midair, sword out, and sliced at the snakes before landing and sliding across the floor as the snakes fell to pieces. Shaw! A dozen snakes emerged from Orochimaru and made their way towards Sasuke, but he only kept his sword sheathed on his back before removing the bot arms from his sleeves so the top hung from his waist. Sasuke fully activated his cursed seal as the snakes got closer, growing gray skin with a black pointed start in the middle of his eyes and white hair that resembled Uchiha Madara. Simply put, for a snake that crawls around on the ground to dream on flying is just impossible, and you still wanted to do it. So you targeted a little chick inside a nest and got targeted in return. Suddenly, the snakes that had been encircling Sasuke were torn away, revealing Sasuke with his bone like wings spread wide. Now, I'm going to fly high into the sky, like the eye of the hawk. Orochimaru screamed and fired at Sasuke. Sasuke, he exclaimed as he remembered a discussion with Sarutobi Hiruzen. Rewind as Hiruzen stood behind him. Orochimaru was kneeling at a couple of graves when he noticed something on the ground and reached for it, picking it up. He inquired, "What is this?" The god of shinobi exclaimed, "Ooh! That's the skin of a white snake, must have been hard to find." Orochimaru appeared perplexed. He said, "I've never seen anything like this." Sarutobi grinned at him from below. "Fufu, to be honest, same with me. That's something very rare that you don't get to see often." "Why is it white?" No. One really knows, no one even thinks about that. For a long time now the white snake has always been a sign of good fortune and rebirth. He looked down sorrowfully and trailed off, "Good fortune and rebirth. The fact that you found it here at this grave might be some sign. Maybe your parents have been reincarnated somewhere, so that they can meet a grown-up like you." "When is that going to happen?" Weeping, Sarutobi said, "That I don't know." Nobody at the time realized that Orochimaru would turn into a monster, so he grinned as he looked down at the skin. The flashback has ended. Back in the present, Uchiha Sasuke stood over the grotesque Orochimaru, who lay dead on the ground in 3 separate pieces with blood dripping from its head, in his sealed form. Just as Orochimaru's head appeared, Sasuke felt some pain and keeled over slightly, allowing his seal to return him to normal while he said, "So this is the end, how disappointing. It's starting to kick in, I see. The body fluids from this giant white snake vaporize when exposed to air. It's a numbing poison, I cannot be destroyed, you can't kill me with your insignificant jutsu, Cuckoo. Now, I'll take you." Sasuke's Sharingan gazed into Orochimaru's narrow eyes as everything went dark and blurry. He opened his maw wide and dove at Sasuke. Sasuke looked around and noticed that he was in a completely dark area. "What is this place?" "This is a separate dimension inside of me. It's where we'll hold the ritual for transmigration." A form began to bubble up beside him, taking shape. The form then revealed Orochimaru's left side of his face. "Let's start." As faces appeared around Sasuke, some revealing women, others revealing men, and old containers, snakes began tangle around him. Sasuke stared at Orochimaru, who screamed, "Cuckoo! Those eyes will finally be my own," making a lunge for Sasuke. Alongside Kabuto in front of him, Kabuto was making the medication, totally unaware of what was truly taking place in a lab room full of jars of specimens. "Looks like this medicine won't work anymore. Tomorrow, or even today, we'll have to do the transmigration ritual. Though I can imagine Sasuke-kun being agreeable and saying, yes," he continued and turned to leave. Well, even Sasuke-kun wouldn't be able to withstand that ritual, he thought as he opened the door and left, but he couldn't shake the unsettling sensation. "What is Sasuke-kun doing here?" he asked, slipping up to the wall next to the door and peering in to see Sasuke standing in the middle of a large white, scaled snake. "That's the skin of the giant white snake. That means the ritual is already over," he thought as he looked at the snake. Soon after, he discovered Orochimaru's room, where blood was leaking out of it. When Sasuke looked back, he saw Kabuto enter. "Kabuto?" When Kabuto asked, Sasuke just walked by him without moving much. "Right now. Which one are you?" Sasuke asked back, looking at him with boredom. "Who do you think?" "This is where the transmigration ritual," Sasuke said, confusing Kabuto as he used his Sharingan to transport him to the ritual grounds. He looked across the plain and saw Orochimaru and Sasuke staring at each other while covered in a viscous substance. Orochimaru's hand, like appendages, came off of him and headed for Sasuke, but he released his curse mark, overwhelming Orochimaru's. "I am impossible. This is a separate dimension I created," Orochimaru cried in pain. "There is no way that this is possible. This is my Orochimaru. In front of these eyes all your jutsus are, you should know by now," Sasuke spoke up. "His will is eroding the space," Kabuto said, watching in disbelief. This isn't possible. I am Orochimaru, the immortal. This isn't how I die. This world will be revealed by me, the one with the secret to it all," he screamed in pain. When they returned to reality, there was nothing left. Orochimaru Sama has died, Kabuto exclaimed in shock, "but this is like..." With a smile, Sasuke said, "I took him over." He then left a very perspiring Kabuto behind and left. When he pulled out his sword and found himself in a room with a huge tube filled with water, a voice said, "So it was you after all. That implies that you vanquished the snake bastard." "Yeah, and I'll let you out of here." Sasuke grinned and slashed out with his sword, slicing the tube open and letting water pour out. When he looked where the water was, he saw a man emerge from the water. Thanks Sasuke, I'm finally out. After giving him a quick glance, Sasuke turned slightly and said, Suigetsu, you're first, come with me. First myself, then the others? He asked. 2 others, I'll take Jugo from the northern hideout and Karen from the southern hideout, he clarified. Really? What? Nothing, just don't like him, just thought, we won't be able to get along, hey, Suigetsu said, looking up fully formed and flashing his shark-like teeth. There's no need to get along especially well, but together. Of course, you did save me after all, if you say work together I don't mind, but you're crazy for choosing them, Sasuke. Shut your yapping, put your clothes on, we're going. Suigetsu then materialized behind Sasuke's hand like a gun at his head, saying, ha ha, such high and mighty words, let's make our relationship clear, okay? Suigetsu smiled and said, you were a favorite so you could stay by Orochimaru and weren't locked up. Just because you defeated him doesn't make you superior to me. We were all after him, sooner or later someone was going to kill him. Sasuke turned to face him indifferently. Simply put, you had more opportunities than the rest of us to murder him. So what? In this situation, I've got the upper hand. He then raised his hand to say. Just kidding, a joke, even in this situation, not even a regular heartbeat, so it wasn't luck, I'm relieved. You are strong, according to rumors I've heard for a long time. Your team is the one that beat my great senpai, Momochi Zabuza, right? Sasuke stared at him, unable to speak because he didn't feel compelled to. I'll accompany you, but I'd like to make a quick stop before we pick up the other 2, okay? Afterwards, looking up, Sasuke read, the Great Naruto Bridge, hey. He and Suigetsu were now standing in front of a bridge. Sasuke, it's nothing, let's go. When they finally reached a field's end, Sasuke yelled, right here, Suigetsu. The 2 graves in front of them were Haku's grave on the left, which was marked with a cloth, and Zabuza's Zanbatu, which had a sword behind it. Suigetsu approached and took it, saying, I'm going to take this, Zabuza. Senpai. Heavy, so this is the Kirigakure's demon Zabuza's beheading sword, he said, raising it into full view. With a glance in his direction, Sasuke said, can you use that with your strength? I trained and admired the 7 swordsmen because their weapons were handed down from generation to generation. Maybe I wouldn't lose to you as long as I have this big sword. Additionally, I believe that this sword will be useful if Jugo joins the team. Hey. Sasuke said with a slight smile after strapping the sword to his back and unclicking the hilt before putting it in his belt. Well then, let's go to the closer one, Sasuke. Southern retreat. Gawa. The sound of someone being flung to the ground was heard. A red-headed woman stood in an underground corridor, staring down at a man. Orochimaru is dead, so I can't let you do whatever you want. This chakra, it can't be, she said, turning around but stopping in her tracks before looking up. Suigetsu turned to Sasuke and said, may I ask you a question? We were walking across the ocean at the time. What? You are fathering teammates, but why? I have a goal. There is a better chance to achieve that goal as a small team, Sasuke said, casting a sidelong glance. But why me? From the time I got close to Orochimaru, I thought of this possibility and chose a powerful shinobi. Hey, but I don't see why Karen should be chosen because, in contrast to me, she is Orochimaru's subordinate. She has previously tampered with my body, and I find her attitude intolerable. After giving it a quick glance, Sasuke said, she had a special power that no one else has, but there are a lot of other strong shinobi that would be easier to handle. Well, I must say that's accurate. When Sasuke and Suigetsu eventually entered the hiding place and past cells filled with people who were on the verge of starvation or similar conditions, someone saw the Uchiha crest on Sasuke's back and said, that's Uchiha Sasuke. Why is he in this place? Wait, if he's here without Orochimaru, then that rumor could be true. That's it, he came to free us after defeating Orochimaru, yelled an excited prisoner. Another prisoner, however, didn't seem to be so hopeful, saying, stupid, there's no way that's true, besides Orochimaru can't be defeated. So it really is you guys. The 2 continued until they came across a woman with red hair, glasses, and very tiny shorts and a jacket that exposed more skin than anything else. Sasuke, if you're here by yourself then the rumor must be true. Feeling left out, Suigetsu said, that's cold, I'm here too. With a glance at Sasuke, Karen asked, what are you doing here? It seems like Sasuke wants to talk to you. Could you lead us to a room so we can talk instead of just standing around? I'm exhausted because I haven't walked in a long time. Karen frowned at him and said, Ha, when Sasuke decided to speak, he said, Karen comes with us, we need you. Huh? Why the hell should I? She exclaimed, her eyes wide. This place has been turned over to me? They were sitting on a couch in a room 5 minutes later. Orochimaru is dead. What about everyone who was being held? Looking at Suigetsu, Sasuke said, Suigetsu, go and release everyone. What? Karen said, looking shocked. Ha, still talking like you're the boss. Suigetsu simply smiled and got up, but Karen wouldn't have it. Don't you dare do it. There will no longer be a need for a guard, Sasuke said, turning to face Karen. How will you respond? Karen watched as Suigetsu shouted, no way. As she opened the door, aside from that, I am under no obligation to accompany you. With a sigh, Sasuke remarked, I guess that's it, if you're against it that much I'll have to find someone else. Alongside Suigetsu. I see, so he defeated Orochimaru. According to Suigetsu, yeah that's right, so, what will become of us? His words were straightforward, you're free of course. Really? Yep, just like me. He laughed. I'll open the lock now, however there's one thing I want to ask you guys. What? Please tell us what it is. The one who defeated Orochimaru and freed us as Sasuke. Once you're outside spread that a man will bring us peace and stability to this world has appeared. Cuckoo. Karen and Sasuke. Karen walked back to the door, locked it to prevent Suigetsu from re-entering, and gazed lustfully at Sasuke before saying, I'll go. Sasuke raised an eyebrow in response, a little perplexed by her behavior. At that moment, Karen approached him, set down her glasses, scooted closer, and said in a seductive voice, if you insist that much, I'll go with you. What do you say? With suspicion in his voice, Sasuke uttered, you changed your mind quickly. Leaning closer to Sasuke, she remarked, when I think about it, I'm getting bored of being on guard duty. When she heard the door rattling, she knew Suigetsu was attempting to enter. She turned to face Sasuke and he raised an arm in response, saying, you, don't get too close. Hey, she said, utterly disregarding him, why don't we just have the two of us? The door and walls were demolished in a matter of seconds before she could finish, saying, we don't need Suigetsu, that thing. Come on Sasuke, let's go, she said. He won't, Suigetsu said, standing at the door with his left arm swollen to at least 3 times its size and his right arm resting on his sword. Sasuke was told, she just said she'll come. Karen, however, did not accept so readily. Who said I would come? I'm simply following the same path. She pointed a finger at Suigetsu and screamed. Oh, that's convenient, isn't it? Then, let's go halfway together. Karen said, pushing her glasses up, just partway. Then, next is Jugo, right? Suigetsu asked, deflating his arm to its normal level. Jugo, what did you say? Are you planning to add that man to the team? You don't care because you're only halfway with us, do you? No, I don't care about it. What the deal? Do you want to get in a fight? Northern Refuge in Orange. Spiky haired man with a huge iron ball chained to him stood in a dark cell in the corner of the room. No, it must be a woman. A woman must improve. No, wait. A man must improve. A guy should improve. No, it should be a woman. No, a man in place of. Sasuke and Associates. Suigetsu complained, we're walking again, I'm already beat. Hey, you're heading to the hideout in the north. If that's the case, we'll be killed as soon as we arrive, Karen said. Is it really that bad? I only know about it from the maps, asked Suigetsu. She paused, and both men gave her a look. The north hideout isn't just a regular hideout, that place is a human experiment lab, and the uncontrollable monsters that are born are kept locked up. After a short while, they had arrived at their destination, but Suigetsu continued to grumble. He drank water and said, hey, aren't you tired? Why don't we rest a little bit? Suigetsu was sitting on a rock when Sasuke and Karen turned to look behind them. You're pathetic, we still have a long way to go until we reach the hideout. Where we're headed should be different than yours, no need to worry about me, just leave. Well, I just remember I have something left at the hideout, so I'm going there first. Sasuke spoke, growing irritated. Stop arguing now, come on. When they eventually arrived at the hideout 2 hours later, they discovered that a riot had broken out as a result of the news of Orochimaru. Sasuke killed anyone who attacked him while looking for Jugo without hesitation. Afterwards, instead of being like Sasuke and controlling the horde of cursed seal victims in their second stage forms that stood in front of the trio, these were mindless beasts. Karen turned in disbelief. Every guard has died, and a full-scale prison has broken out. Suigetsu scowled while glancing about. There's no way to tell which one is Jugo like that, Sasuke. With a sigh, Sasuke turned to face Karen. Karen, is Jugo amongst these guys? She growled, just shut, wait a minute. Shutting her eyes, she searched for Jugo, the chakra source. He's not in the group, he's right. So we're able to chop them down? With hope, Suigetsu inquired. As he gazed at the crowd, Sasuke maintained his expression of indifference. Yes, they're mindful beasts right now. To think you're from Konoha, hee. Happy at what he's going to do, Suigetsu exclaimed. People evolve. Kaden. Hosenka no Jutsu. He exclaimed as he dashed forward, leapt into the air, and yelled. Sasuke extinguished several fireballs at 10 of the creatures, leaving roughly 30.6 remaining. Suigetsu ran up the left side and began cleaving his way through, severing limbs, heads, and even people in half. He had just killed 7 when he leapt to his feet and yelled out, Suiden. Suiryuden no Jutsu. A terrifying dragon then sprang out of the air, taking out 6 of the enemies while soaking the rest, making it ideal for Sasuke to clean up. Ikazuki Hakai. He yelled as he flipped in midair and hit the ground, slamming his hand down. As soon as it touched the last of the water on the ground, lightning blasted the entire area up, eliminating the last of the enemies as it rushed through the ground, shattering it apart and moving directly toward the rest of the horde. Next to Sasuke, Suigetsu showed appreciation for their work, saying, Come, we do good work, don't y'all think? Karen followed, staring at the smoking corpses, while Suigetsu merely grinned and continued walking. Alongside Jugo while still sitting in the corner, Jugo turned to face the door and sensed that someone was coming. A woman, if a woman comes in here I'll kill. Sasuke and associates. Blood was already smeared on the walls from earlier fights, and Sasuke and Suigetsu were currently chopping down more cursed sealed victims as they made their way down the corridors that appeared to be crowded with them. As the enemy turned back into a human, Sasuke pulled his sword out of its gut and said, Hey, you strong, cough. And just like that, another one fell. Karen trailed behind, carefree, following Yugo's chakra signature. A few minutes later, she emerged from a room near Sasuke, saying, The keys? I located them. As she displayed a few dozen keys fastened to a ring, she chirped joyfully. When they soon reached a crossroads with several routes, Suigetsu turned to Karen and asked, Karen, could you please tell us which way? With a frustrated glance in his direction, she said, TCH, since when did you become leader? Tell us which way, please. He let out a growl. She gestures toward the left. That direction. Following her commands, Suigetsu and Sasuke walked down it. However, Sasuke didn't get far as Karen grabbed him and pulled him the other. Karen, what are you doing? Simply, she said, it's this way. Why did you lie? Sasuke asked, raising an eyebrow at her. Suigetsu is headed in the wrong direction. With a snort, Karen continued walking away, saying, he's annoying. I don't like him. Let's go. Sasuke realized she was holding him and said, let go. I can walk myself. This feels like Team 7 all over again, he sighed. Alongside Suigetsu. The cursed deal turns the body into something monstrous. Sasuke, do you also become like that when you use it? Suigetsu continued down the hallway, utterly unaware of what was happening. Point 2. He looked slightly behind him and asked, but got no response. After realizing he had been duped, he asked, are you even listening to me, that bitch? He snarled as he turned to leave. Karen and Sasuke. At this point, Sasuke and Karen were standing outside a heavily secured door that appeared to be impenetrable. When Sasuke noticed chains being wrapped around the door, his curiosity took over and he asked, here? Karen said, yeah, Yugo's inside here. Karen started using the several keys she had to unlock the door, but before she could reach for the handle, Sasuke put his arm in front of her to wipe her away. I'll go in first. Karen, take a step back. Jugo, meanwhile, continued to babble inside. No, if it's a guy, I'll kill him. Yeah, a guy comes in, I'll him. He pointed to the door, which was a foot from the opening. He caught a glimpse of half of Sasuke's face before the curse mark took over and he shot up. Like a crazy person, he yelled, bingo, I'll kill, and then charged Sasuke at full speed while maintaining his insane smile. As Karen yelled, Sasuke withdrew his sword halfway from its sheath. He's coming, Sasuke said, maintaining a stoic expression while bending slightly to look at Jugo. 5 minutes earlier, Suigetsu at last. Suigetsu was back in the room with the now dead people scattered all over it. He was about to continue when a voice interrupted him, saying, oh, looks like I've returned. Then it must be on the right then. What did you all come here for? He saw a man who was barely alive staring up at him from behind and said, we came to get Jugo from this place. We want to make him part of our team. A man chuckled, as if it were funny. Kukuku, you guys, do you know what you're trying to do? Guh, Suigetsu gave him a suspicious look, wondering where he was taking it. If you let that guy out in the world. There, Suigetsu interrupted, saying, I agree, but I'll make him listen, by force if necessary. Kukuku, though you're strong with your powers, the man said, finding that even more hilarious. The man's stomach is stamped with Suigetsu's irate expression. Gua, Kuku, you should all be killed by Juugo, the man swore. Just one person wouldn't matter, Suigetsu said, reaching for his sword. Just as he was about to murder the man, a nearby explosion occurred. Karen and Sasuke was nowhere to be seen. Karen was coughing on the ground from the dust and rocks that were coming from the wall, and Yugo's changed fist was now buried in the dust. Sasuke. While Jugo was laughing uncontrollably, Karen screamed, Gahahahaha. Like a Kaguya's bloodline, Yugo's left arm, which was buried in the wall, now had spikes running along it. There's more. As he was saying that, a slit opened up in his elbow, and a tube-like shape emerged. Another huge explosion occurred, and Karen thought anxiously, Sasuke's chakra. Yugo's now. Monstrous arms were grabbed by wind, like appendages that emerged from the debris. Jugo leapt back with his ever-expanding arm and peered into the hole to see Sasuke's right side change, a huge wind emerging from his back. Another one of my copies? I must confess that you're doing something to make a partially change. Controlling the cursed seal is something you're good at. I have no intention of fighting, I just want to talk with you, Jugo, Sasuke said, looking up to see the seal covering the right side of his face and his eye, which was now black with a yellow pupil. Jugo just keeps getting wilder. You're strong. This caliber's first copy since Kimimaro. Instead of striking Sasuke, that dove forward arm cocked back collided with a giant sword. With the force of the blow, Suigetsu and Jugo bounced back from one another. I want to take this guy, Sasuke. You'll get it later, Karen. TCH, we didn't come here to fight, so stop it, Suigetsu. Sasuke said, turning back, I'll speak with him. Suigetsu simply raised his sword and said, you have to take him by force because he won't listen to you. With an insane smile on his face, Jugo screamed, that's it, you're Suigetsu. I remember now. He swung his fist at Suigetsu, who returned the favor by bouncing his weapon off one another once more. Jugo ducked out of the way as Suigetsu returned with a powerful swing. Stop, you two. Sasuke commanded. Karen, meanwhile, had her own ideas. It's good that they can both die. Sasuke appeared between the two fighters as they charged, constricting them with two enormous snakes that emerged from his sleeves. With his Sharingan now in his eyes, he said, you two, do you want me to kill you? The swiftness of Sasuke's movements alarmed both fighters, and they looked down to see the snakes slipping back into his sleeves. While Karen appeared more turned on than anything, Suigetsu thought, right there. That was real murderous intent. I can't handle it, Sasuke. After Yugo's curse mark disappeared, restoring his human appearance, he began to look around wildly, trying to figure out where he was. When he saw his room, he immediately ran for it, screaming as he pulled the ball on the chain. Ah. After entering his room and slamming the door, Jugo knelt down and held his head. He shouted, "Who? Hurry up and lock the door." Through the door, Sasuke approached from the other side. "Jugo, I just came to take you of here. Come with me." Suigetsu gave the door a questioning glance. "He's too scared." Karen replied, "No, that's not it." Sasuke watched, waiting for a response. On the other side, Jugo tightened his hold on his head. "I don't want to kill any more OPELE. I don't want to go outside, just leave me be." "What's that?" "Such a split personality," Karen clarified. "I told you, Jugo is driven with intent to kill that he can't do anything about. He can't control himself. He really doesn't want to kill. I don't know when I'll want to kill another person, just give me the key quickly." Suigetsu scowled. "Just as I thought, Sasuke, Jugo isn't going to company operate. There's no way I'll be able to walk alongside this guy, none at all. What the hell do you guys want? Just leave me alone." Sasuke took a step forward. "Orochimaru has crumbled, and so will this base. If you stay here, it'll be the end for you." Jugo said more calmly, "I don't care, I don't want to kill another person ever again." Sasuke told Jugo, "Calm down, I'll be your prison so to speak. I can stop you." However, Jugo wasn't persuaded. "What the hell can you do? The only person who can stop me is Kimimaro. If Kimimaro isn't here then I'm not coming out." At that, Suigetsu furrowed his brow. "Kimimaro, the Kaguyas." Karen made the decision to clarify. Jugo along with Kimimaro were Orochimaru's favorite test subjects. He was especially fond of them, so they were always kept together. He was probably the only person in this place that would willingly submit to us. Kimimaro was strong. Well, what I'm trying to say is that he was an especially valuable test subject, because he was the only one who could stop Yugo's wild rampages. After saying, "But that guy, isn't he?" Suigetsu stopped talking. Once more, Sasuke spoke. "Jugo, Kimimaro died for me, he's no longer alive." Before saying, "He died for you? Then, you are Uchiha, Sasuke." Jugo appeared taken aback by the amount. Though unable to see him, Sasuke nodded, saying, "Yeah." Rewind. A younger Jugo said to Kimimaro, "Uchiha, Sasuke. Why are they forcing you to go get him, so far that wa?" Sasuke Uchiha. "He is the one who will take my place as the ship of Orochimaru. To bring him back is my aim." "Is it really worth it for that guy?" Jugo wondered why he didn't want to part from his one and only friend. "There are no other vessels that are appropriate for Orochimaru. Only him and I are. He will be the reason I live again. To bring him back, I would die. After all, your power made me more powerful, so I want to thank you, Jugo." "Okay, Jugo, I'll be back." The flashback has ended. "So that's what you meant, Kimimaro?" Jugo said as he opened the door and saw Sasuke standing there. "This is where my team will become complete," Sasuke said as they stood in front of Suigetsu, Karen, and Jugo in a line outside the base on the empty field. "When I said, my motive is to kill Uchiha Itachi of the Akatsuki, to that end, I want your power," the three of them stood at attention. Suigetsu murmured, "I figured as much." Sasuke grabbed her attention by saying, "However, Karen, you previously stated that you had other plans, so what are you going to do?" "Why, yes, I was thinking about it and I'm not really in a rush," Karen said, averting her eyes a little. Suigetsu interrupted, saying, "Karen, be honest, don't you just want to be with Sasuke?" After a brief splutter, Karen screamed, T. That's my reason? WHO has the right to say that? What? See? Suigetsu simply smiled toothily, pleased with her response. "Right on the money. Your voice is breaking. I truly do know, though, that you were once with Sasuke." Karen screamed as she struck him, but his head turned to water and reformed. "TS's." Karen gritted her teeth and hissed. "Suigetsu, stop agitating her. I do believe I said you'll have to start working together, didn't I?" said Sasuke, the mediator. He asked. "Yes, I understand. I'm sorry, Karen. In any case, I suppose I'll be with you, Sasuke, going forward." Hoshigaki Kisame, one of Kirigakir's 7 swordsmen, is partnered with Itachi. "I want to take Samahata, his sword, for myself." "Someone's compensation by collecting swords," muttered Karen, snorting. Sasuke was warned. "Suigetsu, yes, I am aware of that. What are you going to do now that you're out, Jugo?" Kimimaro said that Sasuke would be the revival of his existence. "He sacrificed himself to protect you. I want to see how strong of a ninja you really are." Then it's decided. Konoha, the apartment of Naruto. Concurrent with Orochimaru's demise, he was going to talk to Guran and Tuya today, and if they agreed to accompany him, he would send them to Kiri to receive some training themselves. Kagura had been gone for a day and was headed there, so he didn't have to worry about her because he knew she could take care of herself and she still had one of his kunai to teleport him there if she got into trouble. When Naruto opened his eyes fully, he was about to move when he felt a weight on his left arm. He looked over and saw a familiar blob of blue hair on his chest, using it as a pillow. Naruto opened his eyes slowly, only to be struck by the blinding light that came through the window, which seemed to magnify it just for the purpose of aggravating him. She had a small lip piercing, a big light blue paper flower in her hair that she always wore whenever he saw her, and the amber eyes that he had fallen in love with were all visible when he looked at her face. He sighed as he recalled how exhausted she had looked when she had come to his room the night before. He had told her repeatedly that working with your enemy was never a good idea, but she insisted that it was the only thing she could do if she wanted to assist him. He shook his head and gave her a gentle shake to wake her up. The blue-haired woman stretched and rubbed her eyes wearily as she sat up, inadvertently protruding her chest, which was a bit too much for his hormones to manage. She sighed as he said to her in a worried tone, "You can't keep coming here whenever you want." As he gazed up at her anxiously, she looked down at him and said, "He doesn't control me. I can do whatever I want." He put an arm around her and sat up, saying, "Yes, you can, but what will he do if he discovers that you're having an affair with his enemy, the person he's trying to kill?" She realized that her ex-friend would kill her if he found out when Naruto asked a little more firmly this time. She sighed and sat down by his side, saying, "I know, okay." She turned her head slightly and gave him a gentle shoulder kiss, saying, "But I just want to stay here, it's getting too much now." He says he wants peace and yet he will just kill anyone who gets in his way. What's Nagato up to? Naruto sighed and rested his head on hers, saying, I know, but you won't have to pretend much longer. He raised her head and gave her a gentle kiss on her ruby lips, which made her groan a little. As they ceased kissing, he asked her. She said, somewhat terrified of what Nagato might do to Naruto, well, he has captured all the Jinchuriki except for you and the Hachibi, but I think he might do something soon, something dangerous. Hey, aren't you scared for me? Even though it didn't calm her, he said, you know I can take care of myself. How can you act so calm, huh? She said, looking up with a hardened expression. He will kill your friends to get to you. He will kill you. Do you realize how capable he really is? She spoke sternly as tears streamed from her eyes as the idea of Naruto's death broke her heart. Although she grew up with Nagato, he had become increasingly addicted to the power game over the years, and he would kill if he didn't get his way. She was the one who wanted world peace, but she did it the right way, not Nagato's way. Although she had found salvation in Naruto's arms, she was always soft on the inside, and the fact that she fell in love with the silver-haired man still shocked her because she never thought she could love again after Yahiko. Moreover, there was something about Naruto that reminded her of Yahiko. Naruto loved Konan as much as he loved Kagura, of course, but he always had a big heart, and he had feelings for other people too, which was better because they didn't mind, so he couldn't be held guilty. Well, he was technically under the Clan Restoration Act. Naruto was well aware of her past and the heinous acts of some council members, and he was constantly worried about what would happen if Nagato discovered the truth about his partner betrayed him. He drew her attention by saying, Konan. He said, somewhat optimistically, if you want, you don't have to go back to him, stay here. She shook her head, though. I can't, I know I'm a bit scared, but I have to carry on spying on him, she said, pressing her hands tenderly against his bare chest. I knew the dangers of this when I offered this idea to you. I understood the consequences. She then sat on his lap and gave him a quick kiss. Naruto let out a sigh. He detested constantly placing her in this position. Just be safe. He stopped to give her a kiss on the neck, which made her groan with pleasure. Okay. I wouldn't know what to do if I lost you. She straddled him while kissing him passionately and hard enough to knock him to his back. She sat motionless on his crotch and said, I swear. Does Jiraiya-sensei know of Nagato and me? Since she was still a secret from everyone, she asked. He clarified, and Konan understood that there were too many enemies in and out of the village to take into account. No, there are too many variables around. Konoha walls cannot be trusted with information about you or Nagato. Good knows what would happen if Danzo found out about you. What's Madara doing now? Konan gasped. Right now, he's just made himself known as Tobi to the rest of the members. I also think he may order me and Nagato to attack Konoha, she said with solemnity. She didn't really care that her childhood friend might be killed because he was turning into a monster and using their dead friend's body as a possession. Somehow, she saw his death as a second chance to live a better life in the afterlife. Let them come. Nagato won't make it out alive. She was about to ramble when Naruto pulled her down for a kiss. I know you've gotten strong with your Rinnegan, but Nagato's had years to master his. I'm afraid that he'll do something you don't expect and, he said. I won't die. Okay, Konan? Don't I have too much to live for right now? As Konan grinned seductively and ground against him, making him go hard, he asked rhetorically. Are you sure you don't have to go? I mean you could move here right now and we never leave. Naruto whispered in her ear, sending a tiny shiver down her ear as he groped Konan's ass, causing her to moan. If I didn't know any better I'd say you were after something. It made Naruto sigh and fall back. As much as I would love to, she said, pausing as something pricked her womanhood, making her wet. Have sex all the time with you. I have to go so Nagato doesn't suspect anything. Are you okay? Don't forget, any trouble, throw the kunai. He reminded her, and she nodded before vanishing in a flutter of paper butterflies. He asked her this as he hugged her and gave her one last kiss before she got up and put on her Akatsuki outfit. Perhaps he was overly concerned about the blue-haired woman, but Naruto loved her. After all, she was betraying someone who might be stronger than both her and him, and if Madara ever found out, he didn't want to know. A knock on the door startled Naruto out of his reverie, and he got out of his bedroom, still wearing only his boxers, and opened it to find Kakashi standing there. Kakashi looked at Naruto and, for some reason, felt a surge of pride, but he was able to ignore it. Tsunade. Sama wanted to see you ASAP. Apparently something important happened, he said before leaving via Shunshin. Knowing that something significant was about to occur, Naruto let out a sigh and closed the door before leaving to change into his regular clothes. Office of the Hokage. As soon as Naruto stepped into the office, he saw Tsunade, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Kurinai, Guy, Yamato, Sakura, Kiba, Hinata, Shino, Rock Lee, Ten, Neji, Ino, Choji, Shikamaru, and Sai, the supposed new Team 7 member while he was away. He had been told about Sai and who his master was, but he had been revealing his human emotions now, so he wasn't exactly following Danzo. Now that we're all here, Jiraiya has some information to share, Tsunade said, glancing up at Naruto. So, what details did you wish to discuss with us? Kakashi inquired. Jiraiya explained, there has been information which has been circling in the most places throughout the region, it's about that. Tsunade. Haim called you all here because it kind of affects you all. Data. Neji asked. What is it? Ino inquired when his name was mentioned. Some people grinned, the Jonin looked grim, and Naruto scowled and clenched his fists at something that wasn't missed. My old teammate Orochimaru is dead. It appears Uchiha Sasuke killed him. Is it true? Sakura asked in a voice that was almost whispery. There's no mistaking it, I heard from a reliable source, Jiraiya replied. He's returning to Konoha, then? Asked Ino. Naruto sneered at that, not believing their folly. Naruto, do you have something to say? Tsunade raised an eyebrow in question. Naruto gave her a bored look. Well, first off, Sasuke wouldn't come back here until Itachi is dead and gone, something that will never happen. Secondly, how do we know Orochimaru hasn't taken over Sasuke's body and spread a rumor to cover his tracks? Sakura turned on Naruto before Tsunade and Jiraiya could react, saying, how can you say Sasuke won't come back? Of course he will. Naruto raised an eyebrow at her and said, you really think that? Stupid little girl. If Sasuke finds out that Itachi is still alive, he will never even think about coming here. In my opinion, Itachi is too strong for him. If killing any of us would make Sasuke stronger, he would do it. How are you able to say that? Would Sasuke-kun never do that? Sakura argued. Naruto gave her a crazy look and said, he wouldn't do that, huh? So what is this? See this. This is what your precious Sasuke-kun done trying to achieve more. If it weren't for the Kyuubi and my Rasengan knocking him off course, I wouldn't be here right now, he said, shocking them all, as he moved his coat slightly over, revealing a large scar next to his heart. Naruto wasn't finished, though. No, better yet, what about the day before, huh? You remember the time we were fighting to the death during the fucking invasion? He posed a rhetorical question. Kiba spoke, attempting to break the awkward silence. Kyuubi isn't too bad then, eh? He made a joke that made Naruto and others laugh. Tsunade. Sama, what do you need from us? In a serious tone, Guy asked. I'm going to pursue him with 2 teams. Kakashi will lead Naruto, Sakura, and Sai, while Yamato will lead Shino, Hinata, and Kiba. In the event of a backup, the remaining members will be required. Wouldn't it be best if we sent more? Shikamaru said, glancing first at Naruto and then at Tsunade. Why is that? She returned the question. Because we don't know what Sasuke has been up to or if he has a team, and then there's Akatsuki. I'll have a back-up squad ready in case of emergency. We need all shinobi here at the moment. With Akatsuki more active, they may make a frontal attack. Besides, Naruto's jutsus are so destructive we'll know when you're in danger. She cracked a joke. She got a tick mark when Naruto smiled back at her and said, at least I won't strain my back from fighting. I want you all at the front gate in 2 hours, so prepare for your mission. You're all dismissed, except you, Naruto, Tsunade said after taking a few deep breaths before continuing. Tsunade said, Naruto, you're going to want to sit down, we need to talk. Naruto followed her instructions and sat down to hear what Jiraiya and Tsunade had to say. Alright, so tell me about this. Curious, Naruto asked. The truth about the Uchiha massacre and Itachi, Jiraiya sighed. Kisame and Itachi. As the sky grew darker, Itachi and Kisame were standing on a cliffside, staring up. Kisame followed. Looks, it's about to rain. Before he could say anything, Itachi felt the rain hit him. It looks more like a storm. Somewhere, let's hide from the rain. It's getting cold, Kisame suggested. Yeah, Itachi muttered. After stabbed Samahata next to a body, Kisame said, we'll probably get in touch with the leader soon, while raising the body of an elderly man. More precisely, Roshi the Jinchuriki of the four-tailed monkey, up on it. Itachi gave him a passive glance and said, he appears to be dying. We ought to look after this elderly man. You don't know him, which is why you say that. The Yanbi Uzuden, so he's not your typical Jinchuriki. He was very difficult to defeat, and you didn't engage in direct combat with him, Kisame remarked. Itachi snorted and closed his eyes. Well, I was the one who wanted to go alone, Kisame smiled. How about I half-kill your target as well? Don't say such things, Kisame. Naruto-kun has come a long way, we may not be able to defeat him together. Hopefully Pain won't be able to. They were walking through the forest when Kisame said, I'm a bit tired, the faster we catch it, the faster I can have my rest. Itachi turned to face him and said, let's take a break for the time being. There's no need to rush. In any case, it will take some time. Kisame followed, I'm wondering, there aren't many left, aren't there? It has been decided to seal the Kyuubi last. Recall our leader's statement that the sealing would lose its equilibrium due to its fragility. Furthermore, don't you think that the best course of action is to locate the Jinchuriki as soon as possible, given that we must bring them back alive? Who sat down against a tree trunk? He asked Itachi. Itachi closed his eyes and leaned back, saying, HMPF. I'm not worried. As Kisame threw Roshi to the ground, he paused and said, if we catch the Kyuubi Jinchuriki too fast, Konoha will have a stronger response than last time. Being the last to be sealed is the same as being the last one caught, and Akatsuki has been too active lately. You're right. They have so many contacts with other countries that their company operation could slow us down. The best we can do is catch them up to the Hachibi, but that could lead to trouble. I see, your point makes sense. Good timing, Itachi said, grinning a little as the Sharingan came into play. The two of them then materialized in a space where they were gathered around a lantern alongside the other members. Pain responded by saying, we just caught the Jinchuriki, we had to tie him down better so he wouldn't escape, so that's we are late. Very well, it looks like no one's missing. The Konoha. I'm sure you're kidding me. Naruto stated that he had recently discovered that the Sandaime and the village elders had ordered the entire Uchiha massacre. It was probably the worst way to thwart the Uchiha's plans, Tsunade sighed, saying, I'm afraid not, Gaki. You're telling me that everything that has happened since then has been caused by pitiful old people who don't even know how to fight? Is that what this village is turning into? Naruto sighed in exasperation. He grounded out in frustration, where all our lives and choices are made by people who can hardly wipe their ass on their own. Although he could understand Naruto's point of view, Jiraiya laughed at the wording. That's why we have you, Naruto continued, observing his bewilderment. I know you don't believe in destiny or fate, but believe it or not, when Fukasaku Sama mentioned you being the child of prophecy, he was telling the truth. You are here to support this village's efforts to create a better future because, despite the fact that we older people have made many mistakes, the younger generation learns from them and creates a better future. The part about mistakes made Naruto snort. Mistakes? I viewed the Sandaime as a grandfather figure, but he was the absolute definition of the word. I had long since lost all regard for him as a Kage. He has essentially doomed this village, for all we know. Allowing Orochimaru to survive so he can carry out more experiments and murder more people. He shook his head at the old man's folly, and the two Sannin hung their heads in agreement. Do you know what Sasuke will do once he finds out? He said, ordering the execution of the Uchiha, even those who had nothing to do with it. Tsunade affirmed to those in attendance, he would want the destruction of Konoha. They were relieved to hear Naruto sigh again. He was doing that too often. You know, I'm half tempted to let him, he said, startling the two as he stared at the Hokage mountain, but it wouldn't be what my parents would want or Itachi for that matter. So why have you really told me the truth? Sasuke and Associates. We move as a four-man team from here outwards. From now on we call ourselves Habi. The Konoha. There's an informant I have that you need to meet on the mission, replied Jiraiya. Who? The Habi team. Habi has only one motive. Team Habi and Konoha, despite their ignorance, Sasuke and Jiraiya both said, Uchiha Itachi, simultaneously. The Konoha. Itachi Uchiha? Yes, Jiraiya confirmed. Why him? Questioned Naruto. He's my insider on the Akatsuki. He has been feeding me information on the actions to let me get the heads up. He told me he needs to speak to you. Me? What the hell could he want him for? Raised Naruto's eyebrows. For what purpose? Honestly, I don't know, but he mentioned something about his last chance for forgiveness. So, on the mission, do I look for him, or will he show himself? Naruto sighed, finding this all too much to process. He'll probably show up in front of just you, Jiraiya said. Akatsuki. By the way, speaking of it, I'd really like to start the sealing of the Yonbi Jinchuriki right now, said Kisame. Wait. Do we not have the zombie bros? Kisame asked, noticing two more empty spots as he looked around. Pain responded in his monotone, they're dead. Maybe it's Hitaki Kakashi and Kyuubi Jinchuriki? Kisame asked with a savage smile. Actually, Inara killed Hidan, the Namikaze boy killed Kakuzu, and Pain, there's something you should know about him too. Zetsu, who had been quiet, spoke up. grabbing Payne's attention as Conan grinned covertly. Payne was about to receive a shock. "What is it?" Payne inquired with interest. While Payne stood stunned by what he had heard, he declared, "He has the Rinnegan. There could only be one god, so it was impossible." "Are you certain?" "Good. He knows Mokuton Jutsu too. How many people can use Shinra Tensei so perfectly? He also has a Zanpakuto. In fact, he has two," he cautioned, thinking inwardly. There were too many questions and no answers, and Payne sighed, feeling confused. After all, how can someone else have the Rinnegan when he has it, and how in the world does he use the Mokuton? Does that mean he can? "Gah. When can this be over? I just wish this could be over and done with so I can see Naruto." Conan thought irritably, and maintaining the cold facade was getting to her as she enjoyed being more of a person like she is with Naruto. Little did he know that the person with all the answers was standing nearby, a certain blue-haired woman who was grinning inside at how worried Naruto Payne was. Without showing emotion, Payne said, "Wait a minute, there is more to say." "How about? It seems that someone else has been killed." "Another person?" While Itachi appeared intrigued for their leader to mention someone's death, Kisame inquired. He shocked everyone there by saying, "Orochimaru. After all, killing a Sannin of all people isn't an easy task." After a few minutes of silence, Kisame finally spoke. "He left Akatsuki 10 years ago. Does that mean we don't need to look for him anymore?" "Well, those who did the job must be pretty strong." "Who did it?" he said with a hopeful tone. "Uchiha Sasuke." Itachi's eyes slightly widened upon hearing that, knowing that he is indeed stronger, which is even better for him. With a curious expression, Deidara said, "I wish I could kill Orochimaru myself, Wow, impressive, that's quite the brother you have, Itachi-san." Kisame gave a compliment. "Right now, he has gathered some companions, some ninjas who could become troublesome for us." Zetsu the Venus Flytrap announced his arrival. "You recognize them?" Wondering who we might have to kill if they were a problem, Kisame asked. Payne said, "You should know them too. One of them is, of the Hazuki brothers of Kirigakure." As Kisame heard a name he hadn't heard in a while, he became excited. "Suigetsu? It's been a while, huh?" Itachi didn't move to acknowledge his warning, saying, "Everyone else, try to remember what I told you about Uchiha Sasuke. There's also Jugo of the Tenten, Itachi, Kisame, you should watch your backs, they'll surely be after you." Akatsuki's plans may be thwarted if his team finds out too much about Itachi and Kisame. "What sort of man is that Suigetsu, Kisame?" Deidara inquired. Kisame was quiet for a moment before he spoke. 10 years ago, he was a nice-looking lad, always smiling, but because he was always tearing up arms and legs of his opponents, and because he was cutting their heads off, he was called a second, Devil Zabuza, a prodigy of murder. In the projection, Deidara appeared to smile and said, "They sound very interesting, The Konoha, dude, I had assumed the mission would be simple." With a hint of humor in his voice, Naruto grumbled. Jiraiya grinned, laughed, and took some from Tsunade as well. When you're involved in a mission it is never easy. After a long silence, Tsunade said, "Well, brat, you should go get ready. Good luck. Oh, and remember that Guran and Tuya," Naruto said, nodding before getting up and walking away, leaving Tsunade and Jiraiya to continue their conversation. Kirigakure, the office of Mizukage, only because she and Mei got along so well did Kagura truly enjoy her time there. She had arrived just moments earlier, having used her enhanced speed to get to Kiri faster so she would have more time to spend there. Even though she was in the office, she was standing next to Mei, and in front of them was the new Kiri no Shinobi Katana Nanan Shu. Her primary purpose was to assist them in unlocking their Zanpakutos and then assisting them in training them, as she was likely the second most knowledgeable person about them after Naruto, with whom Mei is friendly. "Everyone, Kagura and Kai here," Mei said, stepping forward to address her swordsman. "I'll be helping you 7 unlock your Zanpakutos to gain their Shikai. As you already know, I have my own Zanpakuto, but I don't have the knowledge that Kagura has," she said, pausing as she gestured to Kagura, who waved and smirked. When everyone nodded in agreement, Mei paused her speech and turned to Kagura. "All right, I'll introduce you to everyone now. On your far left is Renji Aburai." She pointed to a young redhead who nodded. "If possible, she will also teach you some of the techniques that come with the Zanpakuto." In addition to wearing a strange outfit consisting of a white nightgown-like garment with pink floral patterns and a dark gray sash tied around his waist to keep it in place, along with bandages underneath, Renji had long red hair tied back in a ponytail and black tribal-like tattoos covering his upper body, including his head. On the left side of his body is a Zanpakuto with a rectangular bronze hand guard with a jagged design, a red handle, and a red sheath. Mei gestured to a bald man who nodded, saying, "Next we have Akaku Madarame." Wearing black khakis and a white tank top with a sleeveless trench coat over it that reveals his bare arms, Akaku is a bald man with a distinctive pair of small red markings at the outer corner of his eyes. He also has his zanpakuto tied to his side, which resembles any katana except for the oval cross guard with what appear to be 3 tiny teardrops in relief on the top and bottom ends. She pointed to a man who grinned at Kagura and said, "Beside Akaku we have Yumachika Ayasagawa." Along with his shiny skin and jaw length hair, Yumachika has colorful feathers on his right eyelashes and eyebrow, giving him a somewhat feminine appearance. Like Renji, he wore a simple kimono with a flowery pattern, and he had his zanpakuto tied to his left side, which is an ordinary katana with a purple handle and a bronze crossguard shaped like a German cross. She pointed to a man who grinned bloodthirstily and said, "In the middle is Kenpachi Zaraki, probably our toughest swordsman." Kenpachi is a juggernaut who towers over everyone with a wild and aggressive appearance. He wears black khakis and a sleeveless haori that has a ragged look to it. He has green eyes, pronounced hairless eyebrow ridges, and a large scar down the left side of his face. His zanpakuto was on his left side, which is much longer than that of a standard zanpakuto, roughly the size of a nodashi with a guard that extends inward from its center like a shinai. The hilt is white, but most of it is wrapped in bandages. She pointed to a man with spiky black hair who nodded and said, "Next to the big guy is Shuhei Hisagi." In addition to having the number 69 tattooed on his left cheek and a blue striped tattoo across his left cheek and over the bridge of his nose, Shuhei Hisagi is a tall, lean man with short black hair, 3 scars that run straight over his eye and down to his right, and similar clothing to Akaku, including a choker around his throat and matching armbands on both uppers. His zanpakuto is located on his left side and resembles a standard katana with an octagonal tsuba. She smiled and said, "The gorgeous Rangaku Matsumoto comes in second to last." A woman with blonde hair also smiled. Rangaku is known for her curvy figure. Her most notable feature is her enormous breasts, which are even larger than Mei Terumi's. She wears an outfit that is simple compared to Mei's. The tsuba is shaped like a cat's head, with 2 triangles on the top half curving into ear points and the bottom half tapering down into a single point. It has a dark red handle. Rangaku has long and wavy blonde hair, blue eyes, full lips, and a beauty mark beneath the right side of her mouth. Mei pointed to a man with blonde hair and said, "Last but not least is Izuru Kira." In addition to wearing a trench coat with long sleeves, Izuru has blue eyes and shoulder length blonde hair that is combed into 3 points, 2 of which are in the back of his head and 1 of which is combed to cover his left eye. His zanpakuto, tied to his left, is very plain and simple in design, and in its normal form, it is indistinguishable from a plain katana. The crossguard is a typical rectangular one with only an omega design on the top and bottom half. Even Kenpachi, who was a bloodthirsty man, felt dread as Kagura smirked at them and said, "I think we're going to get along just fine." She did this with a dark chuckle, creeping a couple out. Cells held by Anbu Tayuya's and Guran's cell. The 2 girls were sharing a cell with Naruto, and since they weren't exactly a threat, they wanted to join him. Tsunade, however, saw that they wouldn't attack anyone if they were honest about their request, so he inserted the key into the lock, twisted, and watched as the old iron bars creaked open before entering and seeing the 2 girls sitting on their respective beds. He picked up the chair by the wall and sat in it, and both of them gave him a cautious look as if they were waiting for him to do something unexpected. "Tell me, then, why you wish to accompany me?" he questioned both of them. Before Tayuya could say anything more, Guran interrupted, saying in a serious tone, "Before we say anything else, I need to know something." Naruto nodded for her to continue, saying, "Okay. Is the Shodan bloodline usable?" Her calculating gaze was fixed on his Rinnegan eyes as she asked. In response to her query, Naruto nodded and said, "Yes, I can, but it's not a bloodline for me. I created it into a sub-element." "How?" Guran inquired, startled by the situation, which caused Naruto to laugh. He laughed and said, "With the Rinnegan, it gives me the ability to use all elements, including the 6th, gravity. For the past 4s I have created Mokuton, Hyeten, and Shodan." He held his hand out to the ground and focused his chakra on it, and they all watched as a flower began to sprout through the cracks, growing larger and larger each time. Then, to Guran's amazement, it began to crystallize from the bottom up until it was completely pink crystal. He then used his powers over gravity to pull it to his hand, grinning, and saying, "See." Tayuya's eyes were filled with wonder as she said, "Amazing. So, why were you curious?" Naruto questioned Guran. She lowered her head as she recalled that she was the last of her kind. I can also use showdown, but mine's a bloodline. I'm the last of my kind, and when I heard about you using it, I thought you were the closest link I could ever have to a family if you're able to do what I can." She looked up in surprise as Naruto smiled sadly and understanding and said, "Okay, you can join me." "Are you certain?" With some optimism, she inquired. He turned to Tuya and said, "Of course, I see no reason why not to. Why do you want to?" "I never really wanted to work with Orochimaru. The only reason I did was because he killed my family, and I had nowhere to go. No place safe for me whatsoever," Tuya said, trembling with the hem of her shirt. "And when I told that Kurinai woman, she implied that you needed people to work with her in general, and that I would have a place with you." After observing her for a while without detecting any deception, Naruto grinned and said, "Very well, welcome to the team." "Really?" she asked, sharing Guran's hopeful expression. "Yes," he said gravely, "but I need you two to go to Kiri." "Why?" Confused, Guran asked. "I know you have a Zanpakuto, Tuya, but you don't, Guran. My girlfriend Kagura is training the upcoming group of swordsmen there, and they all have them. Therefore, the only reason I want you to go there is so that you can get one, Guran. Trust me, it won't be that difficult, and Kagura will assist you. Additionally, I want you to train with your Zanpakuto more up there, Tuya." "Is the Mizukage going to mind?" Tuya raised an eyebrow in question. After blushing, Naruto shook his head and said, "May and I have an arrangement." Seeing their doubtful expressions, he gave in and said, laughing, "She eventually wants to be one of my wives." "Are you serious?" Incredulous, Guran said, "But you have a girlfriend." "Well, I'm legible for the CRA, so I gotta have multiple wives to pass on my bloodline of being able to use all the elements and restore the Namikaze clan." H informed them, and Naruto nodded in comprehension. Tuya blushed when she thought about her and Naruto. "I see. Like I said, I need you two to go to Kiri as soon as possible, and I'll make sure that Tsunade will allow you to leave," Naruto said, laughing and glancing at them both. As Naruto got to his feet, Guran said, "Okay, and thanks Naruto-san." Naruto shrugged, laughing. He smiled and said, "It's what I do." The two then left to get ready for his mission. The Hubby Team Hubby had just visited an old Uchiha supply hideout in a city ruin. The place was manned by cats. Yes, cats, who were much like Kakashi's dogs in that they could communicate, which the team appreciated. After that, they departed with fresh cloaks and supplies, prepared to fight anyone who came their way. Sasuke's only task now was to locate his brother. Front gates of Konoha now, with Orochimaru prepared for their mission, Naruto, Kakashi, Yamato, Sakura, Sai, Hinata, Shino, and Kiba stood at the gates. They were dressed normally, but because it was pouring, they were wearing cloaks. Even though they were all ready now, nobody was aware of Naruto's side mission to meet Itachi, and nobody knew what was about to happen. As a rookie Jonin, Naruto allowed Kakashi to lead since he had far more experience than he did in running an operation of this nature. One by one, they all passed through the gate and began jumping through the trees, landing on a roof to discuss their plans and formations. "All right, let's get started. We'll start here," Kakashi said, gesturing toward the building. "We'll spread out in all directions and search the 5 kilometers to the north, south, east, and west. If we don't find anything, we'll continue searching outside of the 5 km another center spot and continue as such," Kakashi concluded. Sakura began, 5 kilometers, but we can't use our wireless communication devices if we fan out that far, right? And we will be isolated if that occurs, which is undoubtedly bad news. At the very least, it is advised that we move in 2-man teams during patrols in case we run into the enemy. Sakura, you don't really see it, Yamato said, turning to face Sakura in response to a shout of Kachiyose no Jutsu. Glancing over, she saw that Kakashi had called forth a pack of nin dogs. Compared to wireless communications devices, our voices can travel a lot farther, the largest dog cried out. "Our noses are the quickest to detect danger," another person said. There, Naruto recognized the dog and said, "Pakun," because it was a lazy dog. The dog looked at him and nodded his head in greeting. To get everyone's attention, Kakashi began by saying, "Alrighty, I'll explain the team makeup now. For this mission, you each will have 2 of my dog summons with you at all times." 2. Hey? But, Sakura stumbled. As one of the dogs approached Sakura, Kakashi teased, "So then make sure you little kids play nice and get along. You can count on me, Sakura." "Chan," another said, "Jesus, please stop talking for a moment." Shino was approached by another dog. Another stoic one simply said, "I'll go with you, Shino." Shino found this to be almost ideal. Sai said as he met his 2 dogs. One snarled and the other said, nice to meet you. Nothing had been said about Naruto, so he spoke up, and what about me? Even though Kakashi was aware that Naruto was the strongest person there, they still needed to confirm it. You're the targeted Jinchuriki, the Akatsuki are aiming to take you down. Taking that into account, Yamato and Hinata will be going with you. Hinata has the Byakugan, so she's a good fit for the job. You'll also get the big guy. At that moment, Hinata approached Naruto and the largest dog, possibly the leader, barked in greeting. With a smile on his face, Naruto said, I won't let you down, Naruto-kun. Okay. Kiba, since you have Akamaru, I'll take Pakun. Kiba simply smiled and bared his teeth. No problem, we're already prepared. Then, Kakashi turned to face everyone. Is that okay with everyone? Our first priority is to follow Sasuke's scent. Once we've dealt with the Akatsuki, we'll deal with them. If any of you happen to run into either of them, leave right away and come back here, he yelled, raising his arm. Spread out, and they appeared as blurs in the rain. The Habi team Suigetsu said, well then it's time to go. The four of them were now strolling along a path by a forest when they all abruptly stopped. Jugo and he then stumbled away, leaving Sasuke and Karen behind. Yes. Karen mentally exclaimed as she was hung on Sasuke's arm with a swiftness that would have made the fourth Hokage envious. Sasuke, just the two of us. Sasuke looked at her and said, you gotta go too. Karen was off his arm and walking away in less than a second saying, damn, leaving Sasuke perplexed. Toby and Deidara were standing next to two big clay birds that were obviously used for transportation when Deidara held out his arm, which appeared to be reattached, and said, see, it's no problem at, With an overly cheerful tone, Toby, still wearing that annoying orange spiral mask, said, well, which do we go after? Is it the Kyuubi or Sasuke? After that, Deidara mounted one of his birds and took off, thinking to himself, now then I wonder who to go after, Sakura. Like all the other groups, Sakura was searching for Sasuke on her own, but unlike Naruto, she was adamant about bringing him back in the hopes of reviving Team 7. Then, as it began to sniff the ground, one of the dogs stopped and asked, what's wrong? Sakura inquired. It said, it's faint, but it's Uchiha Sasuke's scent, and the pink-haired girl gave it a wide-eyed look. Toby and Deidara's telescopic left eye suddenly detected movement below as the two were flying over a massive expanse of trees that seemed to stretch to the end of the earth. Looks like I found something, Toby, Wow, that was quick. So which one is it? Was the overly enthusiastic response. Sasuke or Kyuubi? How fortunate, let's go, Toby. So which? Toby held his bamboo hat form blowing away and asked again. Deidara simply grinned and said, come on, hello. Sasuke. After a while of walking, Sasuke heard rustling behind him. He turned around and yelled, who is it? Get out. After a minute, someone emerged and said, that outfit, you're. He saw that he was wearing Akatsuki robes, an orange spiral mask, and spiked black hair. So you're Sasuke-kun, huh? You certainly resemble Itachi-san. Sasuke's gaze hardened at that, which made Toby stumble back before running off screaming, scary. Then Sasuke heard movement above and looked up to see two clay birds flying at Deidara, who had his hands together. Katsu. As the birds collided with the ground and exploded where Sasuke stood, Deidara yelled. I did it! Deidara exclaimed as he landed close to the trees and observed the smoke rising from the crater he had just created. Toby emerged from another tree and congratulated Deidara, saying, that's senpai for you. I defeated Sasuke, yeah. But when they turned to face the crater, they saw Sasuke unarmed and a white snake wrapped around him, seemingly taking the brunt of the blow. That's senpai for you, Toby said meekly. Deidara rounded on Toby and shouted, shut up. The snake vanished in a puff of smoke, and Sasuke was standing in the center of the crater. Toby remarked, you know this guy looks kinda strong. Look at the nice glare he's giving us, Toby. Yeah? Sasuke appeared to be staring at Deidara while using his Sharingan. To think Orochimaru was beaten by this brat, I just can't believe it, yeah. For the first time, Sasuke opened his mouth and said, where is Uchiha Itachi? Deidara seemed surprised by the question and said, huh? When he said, tell me, and I'll let you go. Sasuke's eyes were fixed on his own, and Deidara gritted his teeth. Sharingan, huh? Deidara rhetorically questioned, he is actually Itachi's younger brother. You are nothing without your Uchiha blood, which is the only reason you were able to kill Orochimaru. You're just a stupid person with good genes. Sasuke remained silent as they looked into each other's eyes, but then, more quickly than most people could see, he leapt forward with his sword ready. positioned himself directly in front of the two, and unsheathed it to strike Toby in the middle. Huh? Before he hit the ground, Toby uttered those words, but Deidara had already leapt back up onto a tree branch. We're down one. As he was speaking, Toby stood up beside him and said, What are you, Toby? I'll ask you, the big mouth one, about Itachi. Don't let your guard down just because he's a kid, Deidara shouted. Toby simply waved his arms around, saying, He teleports too quickly. We can't compete with him. Sasuke narrowed his eyes and said, That guy. First, I'll watch his movements with chakra level C1, Deidara thought as he pulled his hands out, exposing dozens of tiny clay balls, and then he shoved his arms out of his pockets and into his clay bags, allowing his hands' mouths to eat the clay. Toby. Don't leave. He yelled as he launched the bombs into the air, and as they fell freely and transformed into spiders, he made hand signals. They didn't get very far, though, because Sasuke made a Chidori in his left hand. He then swung his arm in an arc and struck each bomb with Chidori Senbon, which formed innumerable Senbon of lightning, pinning them to the floor and trees. Some of the bombs landed next to Toby, who fell over. Toby yelled in his childish voice as Deidara was about to blow them up. Deidara S. Senpai. Time out. Avoid doing it. It was then Toby saw something. Senpai. Behind you, behind you. Sasuke was approaching from behind Deidara with the intention of killing him, but before he could get close, Deidara flipped his hand and threw a bomb at him, causing Sasuke's eyes to widen in shock as it exploded. Senpai. He was strict, but a good partner, he sobbed. I shall never forget about you, Deidara Senpai. Toby cried as he saw the area that Deidara and Sasuke had occupied blown up, causing him to bow his head. Deidara skidded in front of him as soon as he had finished speaking. Will you stop talking? Oh, you're alive? He growled. Across from them, they observed Sasuke land safely with his sword still drawn. The ability to produce explosives with his palm, Sasuke thought. He definitely moves swiftly, he said, reaching into his pouches once more and extending his arms so the clay appeared to pour out like liquid. How about this then? I somehow managed to escape by hiding in the bomb blast. Good thing I kept the chakra level at C1. Still clinging to the Deidara palms, the clay fell to the ground and began to take the shape of a humanoid figure. I'll play with you a little longer. The two figures suddenly began running towards Sasuke, but he was unable to cut them with his sword and they just stuck. After a minute of striking and dodging, he used a Chidori to cut one in half and focused on the next one, but he wasn't very lucky because the two separate pieces now form a figure that is three. Still attempting to cut them without success, he reconsiders his plan and retreats, only to be attacked once more. It's not over yet. Deidara chuckled and began to cut them down with lightning. Charged sword, but they made more, so he had to deal with 11. One of them jumped at him, and as he was about to strike it down, Deidara blew it up in his face, causing a big explosion, only for Sasuke to jump out of it and into a tree branch. As he continued to fight and cut them, they grew smaller, but their numbers increased, forcing him to fight back more and more. Toby nodded his head and crossed his arms as he spoke. He refocused as he maneuvered the remaining clay soldiers over to the tree, making them jump at him and explode one by one, forcing him to jump around dodging left and right. Yeah, I thought so. This irritated Deidara. In an attempt to halt the horde of clay creatures approaching him, Sasuke was leaping from tree to tree, chopping them down. When he landed on a branch, one of the creatures grabbed his ankle, and eventually they all dove at him and remained there. Before exploding in a glorious bonfire that destroyed a large portion of the forest, the clay covered Sasuke from head to toe, leaving no trace that he was there. 10 minutes later, Naruto and everyone else when they heard a noise behind them, Naruto, Hinata, Yamato, and the dog had just emerged from the tree line. Yamato muttered, Naruto, Hinata, you know what to do. Yeah. Naruto answered. Hinata replied, yes. After that, Yamato whirled around and threw shurikens into the foliage in the hopes of hitting something, but instead they struck the floor and trees. After that, a figure emerged. Kabuto, Naruto snarled. Kabuto laughed and said, hello Naruto-kun. It looks like I wasn't hiding well enough. Naruto appeared to want to kill, badly. Yakushi Kabuto. You're a wanted criminal in the village with orders to be apprehended immediately, but you must have a death wish if you willingly come out to us, Yamato remarked. Well, I have a little something to talk to Naruto-kun about. Naruto smirked as he watched Kabuto become irate and remarked, so Sasuke really did kill Orochimaru then, otherwise his little fuck buddy wouldn't be here all alone. Before controlling his temper, Kabuto growled, I'd watch your mouth if I were you, you little brat. Besides, I've got something that may interest you Naruto-kun. He reached into his cloak and took out a book. So what's in that? Yamato inquired. Orochimaru. Sama gathered information about Akatsuki from the time he joined onwards. It includes the members he is aware of and some of their skills. At that, Naruto arched an eyebrow. And what? Or something. You brought it here to negotiate? Kabuto threw the book to Naruto, who caught it with ease, saying, "Of course not, I came here to give it to you. The more members you take out, the less I have to worry." Really? I believe that Akatsuki was pursuing Orochimaru rather than you. Yamato, who was tense around Kabuto because he knew how cunning he could be, asked. You see, after Orochimaru Sama died, I found myself without a parent or country again. I was taken in by the enemy. From a young age, I've moved around countries and villages as a spy. To me, things like countries and villages don't hold a firm reality. One can never be too careful. It's also a gift to Naruto-kun. Naturally, that was before I was swept away by Orochimaru Sama, but that presence left me once more. Who am I anyway? The anguish of losing one's identity is something I believe you should comprehend, Naruto-kun. However, you decided to believe in your own abilities and that you are Namikaze Naruto, the son of the Red Death and the legendary Yondaime Hokage. You persevered in overcoming the stares that were aimed at the Nine Tails. He paused as he removed his hood to reveal his right side of his face and said, "But I never attempted to surpass Orochimaru Sama, and merely clung to his great power." He then removed his glasses and said, "But now I truly understand how you felt, you made me become aware. And that's why you came to know your own identity, gaining respect of friends, and with that realization, Naruto-kun, I made the decision that I wanted to be just like you. And for that reason, he then revealed to them that his eye was Orochimaru's on the left side of his face. Now that Orochimaru Sama is a part of this body, I intend to find a new me that is stronger than Orochimaru Sama himself. Discovering a new version of myself is a lesson you taught me and the reason I'm grateful, Naruto-kun. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he decided to wait for Kabuto to act or take action himself. Orochimaru Sama is the symbol of rebirth, and as a goal, greatness meant to be exceeded by me. He'll continue to live inside me, he concluded with an evil cackle. Until the end of time, did you not register with me? Kabuto pulled the sleeve back to reveal his left arm, which was covered in scales, after Naruto made a joke. Orochimaru Sama will grow within me, as you can see it has already taken over. It's already taken over 30% of his body, Hinata said, bewildered, before using her Byakugan and noticing something unsettling. So you experimented on yourself to become more like Orochimaru, that's sad. You say you wanted an identity and you implant someone else inside of you, you really are pathetic. Before continuing, Kabuto squinted at Naruto and said, I'm going now, and I'll kill you the next time we talk, he said before disappearing. Deidara and Sasuke. After a long fight, Sasuke and Deidara were both so battered that they appeared to have been dead for a long time. Sasuke's top had been blown off, leaving him only in his pants and sandals, with his sword resting on his back. Deidara didn't appear any better either. He was barely conscious and had burn marks all over him, along with blood streaming down his mouth and head. Now that they were in a forest, both were attempting to get to their feet because they were equally exhausted. Sasuke got to his feet, albeit a little unsteadily, while Deidara tried to stand up but fell. Where is Itachi? As he approached Deidara, Sasuke asked, but he wasn't going to tell him just yet, because he held out both of his palms, and the mouths opened, sending two clay snakes at Sasuke. Sasuke stared unfazed as the snakes encircled his feet and said, Chidori Nagashi. As the bolts passed through the snakes and struck Deidara, who was flung backwards, lightning erupted around Sasuke, destroying them. Though Sasuke was already worn out from fighting earlier, he felt refreshed after using that jutsu. Hey, aren't you at your limit as well? Deidara taunted Sasuke as he attempted to move but was unable to do so, saying, Cuckoo, I'll win no matter what. At last you're out of chakra. My bombs can help me even if I can't move. Considering the circumstances, don't you think you could display some fear? Deidara turned to face Sasuke, who was glaring at him. Well, Sasuke simply continued to glare at the man, but Deidara burst out laughing. That really pissed me off. This time my art will win, and he'll die. Hee hee hee. Your brother is exactly like it. Cease being so damned cool. Those eyes. I'm so mad at those damned eyes. They're constantly staring down at my artwork, and I can no longer stand them. I can't stand it when people look at my artwork and don't express any admiration. Deidara, who was already exhausted, screamed at the top of his lungs. But Sasuke just appeared to stare, saying, I don't care about any of this. Tell me where Itachi is, please. Then, Sasuke's eyes changed back to their original onyx hue. Deidara then began to growl at Sasuke for turning off the Sharingan, which infuriated him even more because he felt that Sasuke was undervaluing him. He reached up to his mesh shirt, grabbed the top, and tore it off. There was what appeared to be a stitched up mouth on the left side of Deidara's chest, similar to the ones on his hands, but with a variety of seals glued around it. What was unsettling was that it was in the place of his heart, as if he had none at all. After taking some clay out of his pocket, he began to undo the stitches, exposing a gory mouth with a tongue hanging out the side like a panting dog. Before anything could happen, Deidara's voice echoed through the clearing, "This is the end for you now, Uchiha Sasuke." As it began to munch on the clay, strange lines appeared all over Deidara, resembling cracks, and then began to disappear, causing his body to converge on the mouth and eventually resemble a small skull. Having said that, Deidara began to glow before exploding in a huge light that engulfed its surroundings and caused Sasuke to stagger back before he was covered by it. It was raining just a few seconds before the explosion continued until it reached far out, leaving a huge crater, and then it shot high into the sky, separating the clouds and illuminating the entire area. Naruto, when the ground suddenly began to literally tremble, they could feel the explosion intensifying and looked up behind them to see a huge light that reached as high as the clouds separating them. "What is that?" Hinata inquired. They departed for the explosion after Naruto said, "I don't know, but we need to get there." Karen worriedly peered up at the light as it darkened the sky. She could feel Sasuke there, but now. "Sasuke?" she asked, inserting her hand into a seal and looking for his chakra when she realized, "No, I can't find it." She also started in that direction. The friends of Naruto. They were all worried about the explosion and hurried over there, hoping it wasn't one of the others, but Kakashi could feel the chakra of the Akatsuki member from when he was on the Gaara retrieval squad with Team Guy and nearly killed him. Zetsu, the Akatsuki's top spy, had been watching the fight from the beginning as usual because he needed to assess Sasuke's skill level in comparison to Deidara. Deidara wasn't among the strongest members, but he was still powerful enough that it would be simple to put him in his place if Sasuke defeated him. "I wonder where Tobi is," because Deidara went and blew himself up. He looked up at the still blinking light and remarked, "He must have been caught in that bang." "Suigetsu. That is where we were supposed to meet, but he didn't." When Suigetsu saw the light, he became alarmed and drew his cloak aside. He then took a scroll with a snake on it from his belt and looked at it, seeing the snake dissolve off of it. "Oh my god," he did. Before he took off, he shouted. Sight of explosion. Now that the light had finally gone out, the forest that was there was more than just a desolate wasteland with a crater in the center from which smoke rose. Akatsuki, all of the members were standing on the statue's fingers in the base, and everything was silent until Zetsu appeared on one of the empty fingers and said, "Deidara has passed away." He told them, he died by using himself to make a huge bomb. "Oh well, it appears that another one has fallen to the dust. At this rate, there won't be any left," Kisame said with a laugh. He said, "And I thought he was strong too." "And? Who removed him? Sasuke? Or the Jinchuriki Kyuubi?" Itachi looked over and heard, "Sasuke." However, Sasuke died as well. Itachi remained silent at that point, though he did narrow his eyes a little as Kisame said, "Decided to go with MA? Be grateful, Itachi. Deidara sacrificed his life to remove one of our burdens," Pain said in his typical monotone as he turned to face Itachi. "Oh, I almost forgot, Tobi died as well. Deidara didn't care who he blew up," Zetsu recalled after that. "Indeed, Tobi, but it's unfortunate that even that coward was unable to flee in time," Kisame said. "It must have been quite a bang." Nevertheless, Pain appeared indifferent, saying, "Whatever, anyone would be able to fill his pot. On the other hand, it's a pit that Deidara died. For Tobi to brighten our otherwise dark organization, he did have quite an ability," said Kisame. Before disappearing, Pain said, "I'll go, if for nothing else than to give me respects for Deidara." His projection shimmered as he sealed his hands. What if Naruto-kun was caught? No, he wouldn't be caught off guard so easily. "He better hope so," she said, threatening Konan, who had been silent the entire time. Suigetsu had just arrived at an open field when he pulled out the same scroll he had been holding earlier. He unfolded it and placed it on the ground, revealing a summing seal. "All right," he said, raising his arm, after taking a container out of his pocket, removing the lid, and pouring the contents onto the seal. "Jutsu no Kachiyose." He slammed his hand on the seal and yelled. "So, this is Orochimaru's summon Manda. How could someone control him when Orochimaru himself had trouble?" He slammed his hand down, and a huge cloud of smoke appeared, revealing the outline of a creature inside it. As the smoke dispersed, Manda the snake boss appeared, with the Sharingan in its eyes. "I see. Through Genjutsu, Suigetsu asked himself as he witnessed the Sharingan vanishing from its eyes and revealing bright yellow snake eyes. Then Suigetsu turned to face Manda and saw Sasuke stumbling forward. "Oh no," he said as he collapsed forward on his knees. Suigetsu rushed to him and knelt down to eye level. "Man, you're all beat up. Who are you fighting with?" he said. You trash used me," Manda yelled before Sasuke could respond. "You used those eyes to control me," Sasuke said, glancing up at it. As it said its final words, "Use me." Sasuke simply stared at him in boredom, and then the great lord of the snakes, Manda, passed away. "You do realize that was Orochimaru's favorite pet," Suigetsu said casually, pointing out, "Aw man, he died." He then turned back to face Sasuke and continued, "You gotta treat animals better than that, you know, and to go on controlling them all with genjutsu, man." After giving him a quick glance, Sasuke remarked, "There was no time, I did what I had to. I was aware of your presence. Your chakra vanished, so I was wondering what happened, and you were just teleporting." A voice yelled, and they turned to see Karen and Jugo running to them. "Well, we don't care how you put yourself inside and used space and time ninjutsu to teleport yourself to another Suigetsu said, turning to face Sasuke once more. "We want to know why you're so beat up," he inquired. "Just before we escaped, we got caught in the blast. My opponent was one of the Akatsuki. He was much stronger than I thought." Dreamily, Karen thought, "Even when he's all beat up, Sasuke still looks hot." Suigetsu told them, "Well, it looks like we'll need to take a bit of a break." Akatsuki, as he gazed out over the horizon, Pain was sitting on the edge of the skyscraper human tongue with one leg up, his right arm hanging over it, and his other leg hanging off the edge. "He's acted faster than I thought. I need to be careful. If he suspects anything, I'll kill myself before he can find anything on Naruto." Kun. She was a little afraid of how quickly Madara had acted now because she hadn't thought he would move so quickly, but it appears that Sasuke's little adventure had accelerated the plans. Conan then appeared behind him and said, "Pain, come here, he's here." After getting up and removing his cloak, Pain turned around and entered the room. "How is Sasuke doing now?" asked Pain to point to a shadow, drenched figure. The figure, accompanied by Ruffling, said, "Not bad all. He made extremely good use of his Sharingan. Those eyes will be better than Itachi's," as he was putting on a cloak. "Thus, it's time to obtain the Kyuubi. The time is ripe. You can bet he's prepared himself, as it won't be long now. You do it, as you are the leader. I won't accept failure," Pain said, and even though you couldn't see it, you could sense the nod. "I will have to send my Arrancar soon. They will definitely take care of Naruto. They're the ultimate Zanpakuto wielders, and to think they say Orochimaru never does anything worthwhile," added Madara, who was well aware of Naruto's newfound power. "I could sense it from a distance, 2 Zanpakutos in an inner hollow. Kisame and Itachi. It hasn't let up one bit. It's odd for it to be raining so much, especially at this time of year," Kisame remarked as he and Itachi stood outside the cave where the rest of Akatsuki were standing. Suddenly, Itachi looked up at the sky while the rain pelted down in his face. While Kisame watched him with interest, Itachi moved closer to the cliff's edge. "You'll catch a cold if you stay out here for too long, you know." Itachi simply stayed silent, gradually irritating Kisame, even though he was accustomed to it. Kisame continued to remain silent, saying, "Look, given how vicious you are, I'm not sure what you're thinking. It's strange to say this, but from here it looks like you're crying. It's certainly a shame about your little brother. You're now the sole member of the Uchiha clan." Itachi finally raised his voice, albeit quietly. "No, he's not dead, and besides..." "What?" Itachi turned around and continued to share while remaining active. "The storm, has passed. I had, in fact, since it was evident that the clouds were breaking." The Habi team at the moment, Sasuke and his group were in a hotel room. 3 of them were leaning against the wall or at the window, while Sasuke was sitting in a futon. "Did anyone get any leads on Itachi?" Sasuke inquired. Shocked, Karen yelled, "Are you kidding? You're half dead, you're still trying to be a hero?" Speaking up, Suigetsu was genuinely helpful. After observing Sasuke nod, he continued, "I heard plenty about the group Akatsuki as a whole, but no specific information is known. It seems that they're after some kind of special people with weird chakra." "Special?" Jugo glanced at Sasuke while holding a bird on his bare shoulder. "From what the animals tell me, Akatsuki has several bases they operate out of. They say that they feel unpleasant chakra radiating from those places. Suigetsu sees an opportunity and seizes it." Karen kicked him in the face, which caused it to turn to water. "Ha ha ha, never would have guessed that a bunch of stupid animals could sense chakra. Then again, stupid animals pretty much describes Karen as a whole, huh? You stupid asshole." Karen continued to beat him up and yelled at him, I am fed up with your shit. Talking. Come on, cut it out. When he spoke, they realized that Jugo was experiencing his violent urges once more while they were doing that. Kill, I want to kill, someone, anyone. Suigetsu and Karen snatched him in a panic and forced him to stop. Shit, Yugo's freaking out again. Hurry, Sasuke. Sasuke just kept his Sharingan active and gazed at Jugo. As a puppy hears his master say, settle down, Jugo. He stops and feels his knees panting. He apologized, sorry. Sasuke, meanwhile, had dozed off. The blast site. All of the Konoha shinobi were present at the blast site, with the exception of Naruto, Yamato, and Hinata, who were close. Hearing running, Sakura turned to face the source and exclaimed, Naruto. When Naruto noticed that everyone had stopped in front of them, he stopped. Gazing at the crater, he trailed off, so everyone else seen what happened, not that it wasn't hard to notice. What happened here anyway? Sakura said, somewhat dejectedly, Sasuke-kun was here a moment ago, we followed his scent. There's still a faint trace of scent, as well as a bunch of others people's ones. Kiba clarified. This was getting to be a problem, Naruto sighed. And there must have been one hell of a battle, he said, surveying the damage and assuming Sasuke now has his own team. I recognize one of these scents mixed with Sasuke's that I smelled back in town, said one of the nin dogs who was with Sakura. It appears that Sasuke has his own squad. Sakura looked up in bewilderment as Kakashi said, two of these other scents are Akatsuki. I recognize one of them from a blonde clay bomber. You mean the one you sent to another dimension? Kakashi gave a nod. I take it this was from the Gaara retrieval. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that, and after observing a nod and perplexed expressions, he clarified, Tsunade informed me. Then, approaching the group, Pakun said, unfortunately, we can't follow them, the trail ends here. Yamato moved forward and said, it's possible that the massive explosion destroyed him. Another is that he could have teleported himself somewhere else by using his transportation jutsu. He sighed, I could only pick on the chakra residue. Naruto searched the area for Sasuke's chakra source but was only able to detect the residue. Sasuke used transportation jutsu, he said, alerting everyone, now my nose is even better than a ninja hound's. I found Sasuke. Kiba, who had just woken up from his daze after hearing him speak, sniffed around before speaking. Kakashi thought, wow, even better than a nin. Dogs, Kiba's improved too. The Inuzuka must be proud. These kids will have me out of the job in no time. Lead the way, Kiba. They immediately took off. Akatsuki, the figure that remained in the shadows, declared, Namikaze Naruto is no longer a helpless child. He's learned some formidable jutsu. He has insane strength, mastery over all the elements, and let's not forget that he is also a Rinnegan user. Capturing him will be difficult because he killed Kakuzu by himself. Remember that he has Zanpakutos as well. You are aware of their strength. Pain simply patted a sword against his side and said, of course, I have my own. Pain has never lost a battle, Conan said without moving, adding, there's no need to describe our target with such scary language. Hoo, this is true, I've said what I came to say, tell the remaining members to hurry up and capture their own Jinchuriki. Pain answered, I know. Then the figure emerged from the shadows, revealing himself in the Akatsuki, though it was too dark to see his face. Soon, all our goals will be achieved, and when they are, everything will be as it should, he said as he stepped out onto the balcony, where a flash of lightning revealed his orange spiraled mask. The Sharingan's true power, my power, Uchiha Madara's power. He turned around, and a small vortex formed around his lone sharing eye before disappearing, leaving Pain and Conan alone. The sky cries again, Pain, you. Conan sighed and turned to face the outside world. We'll die, I'm sorry. The Habi team, the group, was curious about how Sasuke had healed so quickly, and he simply told them that it must have been Orochimaru's healing abilities, even though he believed he was the power of the White Snake. Nevertheless, they left the hotel as soon as they arrived, already on their way to search for Itachi after Karen warned them about sensing Konoha shinobi nearby. Shinobi Konoha, how are things going, Kiba? Naruto's voice spoke. Stop talking and let me concentrate. I need to focus as hard as I can to preserve what little scent I still have. He shouted back to Naruto, who gave him a sympathetic nod. Kiba stopped dead in his tracks a moment later. Whoa, is everything okay, Kiba? Naruto asked. We have a problem. Sasuke is going fast. Scent of Sasuke just split up, in every direction, it is scattering, he screamed over Akamaru. They must have a chakra sensing type of shinobi on their team that noticed us and came up with a plan to fool our senses, Kakashi concluded. Kiba shouted, looking back, our radios won't work if we split up too far. And the only tracker who can locate him is me. What scent should I choose? Crossing his index and middle fingers, Naruto closed his eyes and pondered for a moment before opening them and shouting, you didn't count me out, did you? Especially when I have my own tricks up my sleeve. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Before they were all dispatched to find Sasuke, more than 100 clones appeared. The Hubby team right now, Karen was in the forest, kneeling down and figuring out their next course of action. Up ahead, you three wait here for my orders, and I'll check it myself, Sasuke inquired. He then leapt deeper into the trees. Naruto. When he heard a noise behind him, Naruto, who was now jumping from tree to tree by himself, leapt down the tree and skidded up to one to look around, only to meet a Sharingan's eyes. At last, Itachi or Sasuke, he thought as the figure emerged and turned out to be Itachi. Itachi commanded, come out Namikaze Naruto, as if he weren't facing an S-rank missing nin. Naruto appeared in front of him leaning against a tree and remarked, you know that whole, doom and gloom, thing suits you well. Itachi laughed about Naruto's actions. I take it Jiraiya Sama has spoken to you. With a sigh, Naruto nodded his head. He opened his eyes and said, I gotta say, before closing them. When Itachi heard that, his eyes widened in surprise. My respect for you certainly went up when I heard. Why do you say that? Itachi asked, genuinely curious as to his motivations. Naruto stepped away from the tree, opened his eyes, and turned to face Itachi. Killing off your entire family and clan is a mission by the village, that takes guts. I honestly don't think I could ever do that. Hell, I'd rather go rogue than have that on my conscience. When he heard that, Itachi smiled a little. I understand, but from where I can see it, the village is better off. It would be better if those old crones on the council weren't in it. They're as corrupt as Akatsuki these days. At that, Itachi's mouth dropped open in a bitter laugh. On to other matters, what would you do should Sasuke attack Konoha? At that, Naruto sighed. Honestly, he continued after getting a nod. Itachi kind of expected that response and grinned sincerely at the sincerity. He didn't want his little brother killed, but he also didn't want Konoha destroyed. I know he's your brother, but I'll have to kill him. I once thought of him as a brother, but the day he left and tried to kill me was the day we lost our ties. I won't go after him just to kill him, but should he threaten anyone dear. I see. What did you want to see me about? The words, Akatsuki, caused Naruto's eyes to enlarge. He held up what appeared to be a large book and tossed it to Naruto, who opened it and sealed it in a scroll. I have information to pass on to you. Is that everything? Followed by a head shake. Itachi informed Naruto, Madara has something hidden in Akatsuki. What? A bewildered Naruto inquired. Itachi looked directly at Naruto and remarked, Zanpakuto wielders, only these are different. They are called Arankar. Years ago, Orochimaru had a bunch of other Zanpakuto wielding people captured. He had found out that all those people are special as they contained an inner hollow, which to him sounded like his curse seal. So after some experimentation with them, the curse seal and other types of DNA, eventually all the Shinigami hybrids had their inner hollow become so merged with them that they became a completely different kind of being with strange abilities. Eventually they had all broken out, but some of them had become so tainted with the power that they had become evil and gone to work for Akatsuki, believing they would gain more power. Unlike normal Zanpakuto wielders, they did not have Shikai or Bankai, but rather something called Resurrection that allowed them to become more like their inner hollow and much more powerful, Itachi replied. Naruto questioned, somewhat unsettled by this development, how much more powerful? That could overpower a Bankai easily if some wanted to. He clarified. Do you know what they call people like you? Zanpakuto wielders with an inner hollow they can use? Naruto frowned and remarked, no, I didn't know there was a name. Before he began to approach Naruto, Itachi remarked, your race is called the Vizards. There are people like you out there and I'm sure in time that you will meet them. I also have a gift to give you, he said, leaping forward and extending his arm. Konoha. Office of the Hokage Jiraiya entered the room looking ecstatic, while Tsunade was sitting behind her desk reading reports and organizing missions. It was no secret that she wanted to know every detail about Akatsuki in order to try to stop them. Jiraiya, do you have new information? Jiraiya smiled proudly and pointed to himself. We've discovered the whereabouts of Akatsuki's leader. Without hesitation, Tsunade leapt to her feet and slammed her hands onto her desk. She commanded, seriously? Tell me everything. As Shizune, standing next to her, yelled as well. We'll use the information to lay an ambush immediately. Jiraiya simply gestured with his hands. Now not so hasty. This isn't like one of your books, we can't just take it at a leisurely pace, Tsunade yelled. Jiraiya mockingly wagered his finger while closing his hands. Nothing good will come from rushing into things, especially in a major gamble like this one. How's this, we'll go out for a drink, just the two of yous, just like old times, I'll tell you everything there. What? Tsunade exclaimed. You idiot, I'm the Hokage. How can I be drinking at this hour? Think of all the SHINOBISWHO are on active duty right now. After 2 minutes, Jiraiya and the ubiquitous Tsunade, who was gushing sake down her throat as if it might disappear, were seated in a sake bar. You know, you could try paying attention to your own advice, you are Hokage after all. Jiraiya replied with a scowl. Tsunade either didn't hear him or decided to ignore him. Jiraiya nodded and said, This Akatsuki leader is in a megacure, right? But that place is strict about inspecting everyone who enters or leaves and keeps 24-hour surveillance. Even when they're hosting the Chunin exam, they refuse to relax their security. It's inconvenient for everybody. It's not the sort of place where a guy like this could move around so easily. But that in itself is the reason. Since the country keeps its internal affairs private, they've been hiding their shame for a long time. Jiraiya replied. Shame? Asked Tsunade, who blushed slightly from the sake. It seems that country has been engaged in civil war for quite a while now. The village itself is divided. Akatsuki leader is also the leader of one of those two factions, he clarified. That country, it's bordered by the 3 major countries, Earth, Wind and Fire. Those countries have often used it as a battleground in past conflicts. They have never been stable internally, and I hear they have a lot of trouble with refugees. Tsunade responded. And so our priority should be to determine whether this information is accurate. I'm going to infiltrate them and investigate. We can discuss what action to take afterwards. He never finished what Tsunade was saying. That's too dangerous for you to attempt alone. I'm one of Konoha's Sannin, you should understand what that entails. He responded with argument. Tsunade turned her head away in embarrassment that Jiraiya had to perform this task rather than her. I'm sorry, you always get stuck with the dirty work. He exclaimed, haha. What's with you all of a sudden? I'm saying you should have been made the Hokage in the first place, that's what the Sandaime always wanted. Tsunade made it sound more like a statement than a question, which is exactly what it was. That's not for me. I prefer the unfettered life. You've been regretting that you couldn't stop Orochimaru, and investigating his movements all the time, haven't you? He remarked with a hint of happiness. Well, there's no need for that anymore. Now I'll be able to get my books out more quickly. As she recalled their former team, she remarked, but fact is stranger than fiction, who would have thought he would actually die? Afterwards, right now, the 2 surviving Sannin were lounging on a park bench while taking in the sunset. As if the entire world rested on her shoulders, Tsunade remarked, Akatsuki, someone who has managed to gather a group of that strength. I can't start to think how strong he must be, and now you're planning to head right into the palm of his hand. When Jiraiya got up, he said, well, I guess I should be going. Tsunade looked down at the floor and told him, make sure you come back alive. If I lose you on top of everything It was Jiraiya who interrupted Tsunade. Jiraiya tried to lighten the mood by joking, you'd cry for me? That's nice to know. But I doubt you cry as much as you did for Dan, ha 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 ha. Tsunade harshly whispered, you fool. Then how about we make a gamble of it? You can bet that I'll die. Since there's no way you'd ever win a bet. And in return, when I make it back alive. Tsunade asked in disbelief. What? Jiraiya joked. Bawahahaha, I'm joking. I've a lot to thank you for. This drew a curious glance. A guy gets stronger when turned down, and he's useless unless he's experienced it enough to joke about it. Otherwise he won't have enough material. So it's Make's duty to be strong, is it? Tsunade questioned sarcastically. Well, yeah, and happiness isn't something that men are meant to seek. You can't even get rejected without us women, she was joking. Ha ha, that's for sure. If anything happens, send a toad to tell me. I'll come for you right away. Don't say things like that. You're not to leave the village. The village is relying on you right now. There are a number of people who could take over as Hokage. A village can't stay stable if its leader keeps on changing. There's nobody in this village that can do the job better than you can. Jiraiya responded by arguing back. We have Kakashi, and we have Naruto if he decides to become a shinobi again. Kakashi's fair enough. Naruto certainly is stronger than any of the other Kages before, but he has too much on his plate right now. Naruto's been training like crazy, you even taught him Rasengan. Well, that was on a whim for old time's sake. I got thinking back to when I was teaching Minato. Namikaze Minato, there certainly is a resemblance. Minato had the sort of talent you only find once in a decade. We haven't had another genius like him since. He was a kind man, and yet his spirit was incredible. He became the fourth in the blink of an eye, he said as he recalled the days. I've never had kids, so I wouldn't really know, but if he was mine, I'd be damn proud. Haha, when you say that, it makes me think Naruto isn't that much like him at all. Tsunade concluded, if you were to ask me, I'd say he takes more after his mother. Jiraiya reminisced, right, she was that kunoichi from the former country of whirlpools. That's right, when it comes to his personality and his jutsu, he's just like Uzumaki Kushina. Ah, that was her name, yeah, always talking that tomboy with the red hair, she was just like a little boy. Jiraiya chuckled. Though she did become a real beauty when she grew up, Naruto's face is more like his father's. He then snatched up his enormous scroll and tied it to his back. That's why I always see him when I look at Naruto. For me, it's almost like looking at a grandson. Well then, I'll get going. That's right, I've got a piece of advice to give you before I go. Make sure you stay away from people in route. Yes, I know. Tsunade said sorrowfully, already sensing that she wouldn't see him again. Well, that's okay, then. See you. Naruto. After Itachi grabbed Naruto by the head, black crows flew directly into his mouth, nearly causing him to throw up, and he was now on his knees, gasping for air. What the hell was that? Itachi said, laughing. I'm sorry for the process, but I gave you some of my power, a precaution for the future. I hope you don't have to use it, however. His eyes widened in surprise as he used Itachi's former Anbu codename to say, I see, thank you for everything you've done, Weasel.san. Itachi simply disappeared after saying, you remember, you're welcome Naruto.kun. But I must be going now, goodbye. Naruto heard the hidden meaning when he said goodbye, which was that he was going to die.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.